Yeah.
Thank you for joining us in our July 7th work session for the Planning Commission. And what I'd like to do is, if we can, let's go around the table, state our names, and for the public to go ahead and state your names. And if you're representing here or are here for a certain organization, go ahead and state that too. So Libby, start.
Libby Anderson, live in the Hermitage area neighborhood.
Benji Murillo, Pigeon Point neighborhood.
Mike Tomey, downtown.
Bill Barton over Bay Street. Bill Shooter, Northwest Quadrant.
Kim McFadden, Old Commons.
Christopher Clement, I'm a planner 3 with the city of Beaufort. I'm a third party who live streams every board commission meeting for the city of Beaufort. My name is Ian.
Kurt Rees, the planning director. Clinton Hall, and I live in a development called City Walk.
Audience.
I'm Paul Trask, I'm representing myself, thank you.
Diane Farrelly, myself and my, mostly of neighborhood.
Hey, I'm Grant McClure. I work for the Coastal Conservation League.
Francis Ackerman, myself in Pigeon Point neighborhood.
Greg Braswell and my wife Stephanie, we're here from the Pigeon Point neighborhood, and I'm speaking on behalf of the Pigeon Point and Higginsville communities.
Thomas Velasco, representing myself. I'm here from the Higginsville community.
Jill Rubin, my husband Tom, and we're here from Higginsville as well. Patricia Dankworth. Just me.
Thank you, I appreciate it. As we get started, there's a number of things that probably ought to at least be identified before we get into the code sections. The first thing is our section 7 comments that we received back from the Chamber of Commerce. And obviously we received them from City Council. City Council has not given us any input as of yet. I will be at the City Council meeting tomorrow evening and making whatever comments from the Planning Commission that are appropriate at that time. I know that at least Bill and myself have been looking at them and going through them. So we have a suggestion that maybe Bill and I go through these for the commission, if that's appropriate or okay with everybody. And then we can bring those back to the commission so that we're not spending a lot of time going through those. And at this point, City Council has not given us any direction. We've just received the comments, but they're comments on ours. Bill has already identified that the comments are made on a document that is older than the final one that we approved. So some of the comments probably are already taken care of on the current documents. But I just wanted to put that on the table, get comments from the board on anything they'd like to say about what we've received.
I think it's a good idea to approach it that way, especially since we've got draft issues and so forth. I do have a concern though. After first reading of our proposed changes, the process was stalled in order to allow for these comments.
Correct.
There's a meeting tomorrow night. Is it on the agenda for a second reading tomorrow night? So are you planning to go? Did you say you're planning to go?
Yes, I'm gonna go, and my discussions with City Council so far has been that they are probably probably going to want us to do a review. And then they might want to have a combined session of city council with our board as a work session. And deal with any outstanding issues that there may be. They may want to also do that with chapter 5. But we've had no direction yet.
Do you know if any council member is going to move to stay the second reading or put off the second reading?
No, but I'm assuming it probably will be.
Okay, I don't know if you have a chance to reach out to anybody, might be good to get that set up procedurally. Just because we only got these over the 4th of July weekend, all of us on the board, so, but applaud you and Bill for having a chance to go through it as much as you have. But I do think we need to take a little more time.
Absolutely, absolutely.
I'd like to raise one point as well.
Yeah,
If the comments that we got from the Chamber of Commerce are from an old draft, shouldn't we ask them to comment instead on the most recent draft? Because it's going to create a lot of work for you, because if it's an old draft and have been changes made after that draft, I don't.
It wasn't too old a draft, so I went back and forth just to make sure, and a few of their comments were might have been different if they had had the latest draft, but the draft they were working from wasn't so old that it makes it that challenging to us.
Okay, I just didn't want to create extra work for you.
Yeah, no, it'll be okay. But I think that just sort of the thinking that we had when we had gone over this was that we've spent so much time on 7 and 9. If we do it again in this meeting, we're never gonna get to some of these other chapters that we got work on. And I think we were ready to, to go back into the protected waterways 1 and then start getting into chapter 2, et cetera. And if we can go through it and then bring back here, I'm just guessing that it'll be a lot easier for everybody and a lot less time spent. Actually, they did I thought, a pretty good job, and I was frankly embarrassed that, we missed some of these things, I can say that for myself. And so I'm not angry at all for them for scrutinizing it.
No,
I wish they had done it in part of our meetings, but they didn't, and the fact is, in the end, we want to get it right more than just get it done with, so.
Yeah, I don't think you should feel embarrassed at all, because when you were as close to something like that as we were for so long.
Right.
Anytime anybody puts a fresh new set of eyes on it, things are gonna leap off the page that we got kind of blind to, but to your point, my initial reaction to this is, why did they wait so long to pop up at the tail end of the process? Because we've been working on this for the better part of the year, and there's been a lot of people showing up to talk about it. I don't, it's very frustrating.
Right, yes.
and I'm probably just gonna do a public comment unless somebody asks me to talk, but I'll do a public comment to try and talk about all these things that we're talking about right now. Prior to them actually getting into the meat of that subject matter, but that's part of that discussion, and Kurt and I have had that same discussion about it gets frustrating when you at the 11th hour, almost 12th hour, go ahead and have comments or concerns, and hopefully that'll change. Maybe they can get a representative to attend some of our meetings. I think chapter 5 is probably going to be similar. Any other comments about that? Yes.
I just want to say, I think you're taking this a lot more calmly than I am. For the Chamber of Commerce to come in, literally, it's 11:30. And never once did they send a representative to any of these planning meetings. Never once did they send to a regular meeting. Coastal Conservation League attends all the time. Historic Beaufort was here when it dealt with those chapters. And I'm going to tell City Council this tomorrow night, because they need to know that if the chamber wants more of a voice in these planning sessions, then they need to have a representative here to give input. That's it.
Thank you, Paul. I'm sure we all feel the same frustration. Any other comments? Any other public comments? Yes, sir. Oh, not us. I thought didn't see it was your hand.
Just a quick question, will the public have access to their comments so that we can review them as well?
That would be a decision from city council.
Is there any reason why we couldn't put them online? I mean,
it
we're looking at
becomes a
them.
public record. I mean, I will tell you just honestly, they're not earth shattering at all. They don't change substantively anything that we did. I mean, they're things that, you know, a lawyer would catch. And being a lawyer, that's why maybe I'm a little more embarrassed because I probably should have caught him, but as was said, you know, when we're all spending so much time on them, sometimes you just quit talking because, you know, we've been talking too long. Or you feel like you've spent too much time saying too many things. So I wouldn't be too critical of them because I think when we get back with you at it, you'll see that they were things that needed to be addressed. Most of them were corrections we needed to make, and they weren't substantively undermining what we were trying to do. I didn't see that. In fact, I was a little surprised that they took some of the bigger changes that we recommended and didn't comment on them at all. You know, I was kind of surprised at that. Most of their comments were on the subdivision regulations in the detail that we're asking for in a subdivision application. And a lot of it was just the way that we're asking for it, and we probably need to do a little better job of separating what's on a subdivision plan from what accompanies the subdivision plan, things like that. But we just need to talk through those to get those things worked out.
So I was just gonna say, we've made very substantial changes to those chapters. So I would make no apology whatsoever for, you know, work effort that we put into it.
Yeah, if they had attacked fundamentally the way we are going about recommending, for example, the way that subdivisions are being handled, the level of detail that we're now gonna expect as part of the subdivision process, application, and so forth, I'd be maybe more troubled by the fact they didn't show up and give us that input, but they're really less of that kind of substantive nature and more just trying to make sure that we got the wording right. That's the way I look at it.
And I would just say that
And I'm not saying it to cover for anybody because I'm not a member of the chamber, so.
40 to 50% of the comments are questions like, what does this mean?
Right,
Yeah, that kind of stuff, you know.
yeah.
And had they attended some of the meetings.
They might know the answer to that. Yeah.
No, that's them. Yeah.
Any other comments about that? All right, so I'm gonna,
Mike, I think, from looking at the crowd, I think there's 3 or 4 people that are here for, I think the ADU or short-term rental discussion, which I'm just saying this because, chapter 8 may take some time, as we know. I don't know if you want to hear them so they don't have to be here all afternoon or.
yeah, I was, thanks. I was just gonna go to our regular agenda. I just wanted to cover that section 7 because that was kind of a surprise to everybody first. So I'll go ahead and open it up to public comment now.
Chapter 2 probably, or whatever they want to talk about again.
What public comment, whatever you want to talk about. We usually try to make sure that our comments are specific to certain chapters that we're actually reviewing here, but public comment is open to anybody for any public
We
comment.
should probably have the person come up, so,
Yeah,
over here, because the camera is like right there, right?
Yeah.
so,
Sure.
so is the speaker, so we won't be able to hear them unless they come up.
Is our video actually working?
Mhm.
Okay, great. Paul, do you want to start off?
So, yes, thank you, Paul Trask, 608 Glade Street. So the issue is then when you begin to go through each paragraph in a certain chapter, then you want the comments at that time? You
No.
want everything in advance?
No. I think like, going into chapter 2, or, we've already done chapter 8, if the public has any comments on any of those chapters, it's fine, we can hear those comments. Now, if they want to be more specific when we get into those, they can, stay, and we'll certainly, take their opinions as we go through. Anybody else? Yes,
Are you
please.
ready for chapter 4, Mike, or not yet?
Well, no, any public comments that you have, come on up.
Okay, all right. I'm Brett Braswell, 2200 Wilson Drive. I'm here on behalf of the Pigeon Point and Higginsville communities. And want to talk about the ADUs in section 4.5.3 pertaining to carriage houses. We'd like to ask that you revisit that section pertaining to 2 ADUs on a T3N and T4 lot that have been that way since 2017. We understand how it got there. There was a public outcry of homeowners looking to put a granny flat or a in-law cottage in a backyard. What we have now is something other than that. To our point, the congestion that is forthcoming, we're barely into this. We only have a handful of ADUs in the community. We have 2 on a few properties. One in particular is the T3N property, and it's on Lafayette Street. If you drive to the end of Lafayette, you'll see the sign noting compound for sale. This is the one that strikes home, and we'd like to address that. We've got others here that live directly in that area. I'll let them speak in a little bit more detail, but we have a housing crisis. We understand that. We don't need to be lectured on the housing crisis. That much we understand, but do we need 2 ADUs on any of these properties? If you take the ones in particular on Church Street that exist now, it's nicely done. It integrates well into the neighborhood. But drive through there and try to imagine that block full of 2 ADUs on those properties. So several of us attended a video conference back in December where major cities dealing with the same topic came up. Not a single one, including Denver, Nashville, Louisville, have 2 ADUs on any property. So we'd like to take a closer look. Listen to our neighbors and see what we have to say and amend the current code for something that's more sustainable for all of us going forward. And we have others here that would like to speak in a bit more detail about specific areas. Thank you.
Mr. Brett, just one question for you. Do you have a specific recommendation? Do you think it should be, for example, do you think it should be limited to 1? Do you think it should be limited to 0?
One is fine. We see no problems with 1. Generally speaking, we see no problem with 1. But it's the 2 on a tiny, less than half-acre lot. And if you could envision 2 on this whole corridor up in the upper section, Church Street, Newcastle, Harrington, imagine a half dozen on each block. And then if you want to see parking like we currently have on Calhoun Street, well, revisit those areas when that comes, because that's what it will be.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Are you suggesting that these be over the garage
structure or a separate? We go with one structure, I'm with you on the one, but would it be a garage structure?
It can be both.
Or either.
It's an either or, but as long as it's one. We think two,
One living.
volume that's not sustainable if you're continuing to allow two on T3 and properties.
Thanks, sir.
Thank you.
Francis Ackerman, I live at 2407 Pigeon Point Road. Back in October, when this became apparent to the neighbors, what two ADUs actually meant. As Greg said, when we had the charrettes and all that discussion, it didn't seem like a bad idea. But sometimes when reality hits and you see it built out, and I believe those comments are coming across nationwide also. We took a survey of our neighbors quickly, and we submitted a petition with 238 signatures, asking to go to the one ADU and also asking for it to be an owner on premises situation rather than somebody buying a property to run it as three separate units without living on the property and having any oversight on the property, such as noise, parking, all the things that can happen when properties are left away from the property owner. We took note that the fact that Pigeon Point was the only neighborhood where there were two ADUs to be allowed. The citizens of Pigeon Point love Pigeon Point, and they take that as an affront. Why were we chosen to have two when other neighborhoods only have one? Neighbors are very concerned for the safety in the neighborhood. Our streets are fairly narrow. There are many of them that have no sidewalks. Because they have no sidewalks, you have mothers and fathers and grandparents with strollers. We actually have two neighbors who are in wheelchair type situations that are using the street to get their exercise or just to be out in the community and see that we have children on bikes, we have senior citizens on bikes, we have walkers. We worry for the safety if we have increased traffic that the infrastructure was not planned for. We also worry about emergency vehicles. When you have more density than the neighborhood was designed for and that driveways have, you're gonna have people parking on the street. With that, the emergency vehicles can get through, but if you put that increased density, that will be a safety risk in a neighborhood with a lot of children, a lot of elderly people. Let me see, I think. The other concern we have, and I don't think this was thought of, I'm pretty sure this wasn't thought of during the charrettes, is the density or the increase in short-term rentals because of this. The short-term rental license process, as we understand it, is per property, not per individual. So with the addition, and this comes up in the Lafayette compound, it's even suggested if you go to the QR code that the whole process could be used to have 3 short-term rentals on a property instead of the one, which could triple the number that the committee so painstakingly studied and thought was the proper density for short terms in the community. There's also a little bit of a problem with that process now in that, and these are inferences, but they've come from owners, from people who've looked at property through the real estate committee as a community as to, don't buy this property that's this price. I can put you in this property that's a little bit more expensive and I can see that you get the license. There's a little bit of, I know this license is being surrendered at this time and somebody else getting out, such that I mean, new people have not been able to get licenses. So there's a little bit of something going on with that process, that if we increased it to 3 properties and had that as a sales technique, it could be a problem. The other last point I'll address quickly is the housing shortage. With the number of apartment residents that have been built recently, I personally don't see how we could have a shortage. Now, I don't want to live in an apartment, and I'm sure many people don't. But back to when I was 25 and wanting my first family home and wanting it a city neighborhood. I couldn't get it because they were limited. There were only so many structures available. You had to wait your turn. Let's not ruin the ambiance of our cities by increasing the density such that we can't even recognize what once was the sought after neighborhoods in the community and city we love as Beaufort.
How long ago was it that you had those 150 signatures?
Oh, it was 238. It was, I believe in October because we were hoping to be on the January work session with the city council. The city council received it, city manager, and we've been in contact with every member of the city council. They're well aware of our concerns.
If you wouldn't mind forwarding that document to me, I'd
Okay,
appreciate it.
I will go upstairs because it was drafted into the city archives, that system, to see that that is sent to you.
Thank you. You're aware of it. Or not?
I don't remember it, but
I think this board would probably like to have that.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Why don't you go in and tell me what the address is, that compound you're talking about over there in Fidget Point?
So the only two sides of it, I'm Jill Rubin. Yeah, Kurt and I are very close on this.
Let me write this down.
I'm at 2001 Lafayette, so I believe it's 2015, 17, 19, 21. I believe 21 is the one that has the 3 homes, and I'm sorry, 1 home and 2 ADUs.
So there's 3 addresses.
There's 4 homes, 5 homes across the front, and then the compound is in the back. It's 1
So
home
they
with
commonly,
2
are the
ADUs.
4 front houses commonly owned by,
No, those are all individual properties.
That's where the curve is.
Correct.
okay.
I'm back in that curve.
I know.
Yes, I luckily have 2 sides of the compound and it's lovely.
So when they're talking about compound for sale, are they talking about selling all 4 of those street, 3 of the 4?
The ones in the back next to my pond.
That's great.
So
If you haven't driven back here, you won't see that.
Let me start again. There are 4 lots on Lafayette Street that have something to do with a compound.
No.
No. What,
Do you have that printout? I'll show you. This makes so much more sense when you see it on a map. This is my property. So this is where 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 houses are. This whole section is compound. There's 1 big house here and 2 big houses here.
okay,
So
so
these
this
3
is
houses are
this is what's
compound.
this is what's for sale,
Correct.
and that these are owned by
Individual
different
homes.
people. Okay,
Correct.
thank you for showing me.
So yes, I have the property that backs up 2 sides of the compound.
Okay,
So I guess our complaint is, it seems like there was a lot of permits according to DHEC, because our property is now flooding. There's a bunch of construction silt runoff. Our pond is flooded. It's going into the marsh, the runoff. They have brought in so much dirt in. And when we talked to, they raised it actually about 12 feet higher than what it was.
Well,
Yes, 12 feet. They had now, and
how
again,
long ago was this done?
they just brought the last maybe 6
Right,
more
right back.
loads of dirt in 2 weeks ago. Maybe 2 weeks ago and sodded it. Because
I
of
think
flooding
we're
out.
restricted to 3 feet.
DHEC told us they didn't have to pull a permit or seek approval because it's only 1 house and 2 ADUs. They didn't have to, they did as 3 homes.
Well, but we have our codes.
I'm just telling you what DHEC told me. This has been an
Can
absolute
we look into that,
disaster.
Kurt, and see what's going on?
we're pretty well at 12 feet, I think is. We've been out there almost every week.
I can show you
Yeah.
pictures of before they started,
are
pictures
they in
after, and you
compliance
can
with
see
their
it.
permit, Kurt, or are there violations of the permit?
I think we had the stormwater engineer and DEC and code enforcement out there 2 or 3 weeks ago, and I think it was deemed to be compliant.
Well, I did point out to Ken as well that it was supposed to be 7 feet utility easement between my property and the first home. And it's 5 feet, and he told me that he didn't know that code, it wasn't up to his pay grade. So anyway,
Well, I mean, a utility you might have thought something.
my property is only 5 feet off the house. I know looking it up in the city code, it should at least be 6. So there's been a lot of things that have gone on. And unfortunately, I don't have another neighbor to support that this is what we're going through. But these ADUs, we've had the owner tell other people to come by, same thing, that they could all be rentals. We have a gator in that pond. We're concerned about liability issues, that it could be short-term rentals. We're gonna end up having so much traffic, and the traffic can't park on the street, they park between the homes. So all this traffic we look at directly every day. So I'm wondering, I agree with one ADU, but I think it should be on a size constraint. These are full-size homes, these aren't little cottages, these are 1,600 square feet for the ADUs, and there's 2 of them. And then the larger home, I believe, is 2,000 square feet. So I'm saying if they have one ADU, could we limit the size to maybe 700 or 800 feet and make it a true cottage? Also, I was wondering, can a community, a subdivision opt out of ADUs if there's enough support behind it that we don't want it? The traffic survey, because it was, I believe, didn't have to be done because it wasn't considered 8 homes, it was considered 5 homes for this builder. What else? I don't know, this has just been so frustrating.
May I ask you a question?
You can ask me any
And this is, I'm in total support of what you're saying.
I'm sorry.
Patricia Dinkler, I just want to ask one question regarding this whole packet, the 64 pages for today's meeting. Page 59, where it says,
Well, can you wait until?
We need to take one comment at a time.
oh, okay, then I won't say anything.
Do you have anybody else you want to add as well? It is what it is, I guess. Thank you for listening.
Thank you,
Please be more-
appreciate it.
Please think about this when you allow other people to do it. It's ruined our home.
Okay, another comment? Yes, sir.
Thomas Velasco, 1402 Palmetto Street. And I'm coming from a, I guess, unique perspective because I'm new here. I came here in November. Love the community, love the idea that people are out biking and I see families and I see everything. I came from a community and I appreciate what you do because I served on the planning board in Westwood, New Jersey. And unfortunately, what I watched there was the ADUs turning into rentals. And I wanted to comment on 2 aspects. You talk about the housing crisis. I watched the housing crisis get exacerbated to buy these rentals because all of a sudden, when I could buy a property that I could turn into 2 rentals or 3 rentals, I could charge quite a bit more. And we watched people from the community trying to come back and live in our community who couldn't afford to. They were completely priced out. And a lot of the people who work in our community were completely priced out. And moving here, it was wonderful to see a neighborhood where I saw people I knew every day and I could say hi to people. And when you have these short-term rentals, that is something that you severely lose because you have a constant influx of people. The other thing I saw was parking can be so much worse than you can even imagine because oftentimes when somebody rents what is a house, not what I would consider in my head as just an ADU. I mean, they're huge, some of these that you see. They're coming with 2 and 3 cars because it's a family that's coming down. So now you don't only have 1 car parking, there's not even room for that extra parking. You have them bringing 2 and 3 cars. And now congestion on the street for emergency vehicles, for larger trucks that are coming through becomes almost impossible. So, and I appreciate everything you're doing. I appreciate you hearing these comments. I definitely think that that restricted number to 1 ADU would be a much more reasonable thing. I also have a question, and this is a naive question. I apologize. I should have done my homework. But in your definition of an ADU, because I knew we had to try to change our definition. Is there what's the strict definition of an ADU here? And I only ask that because ours had been based on having a kitchen. And unfortunately, we discovered that a lot of rentals don't need a kitchen. A microwave and a coffee machine is all somebody wants for a rental.
we'll be reviewing that when we get into.
Okay.
Chapter 4.
Okay.
So, but we'll take a look at that, certainly.
All right. Thank you for
And
your time.
y'all are more than welcome to come back as we go through this to get into it.
Um,
Sometimes it takes us quite a while to get through each of these chapters because
And I understand.
we're trying to, we're rewriting a lot of the code, trying to get it a little bit more up to date. So, kind of bear with us and, as much as we can, we'll let you know where we're going, on it based on our, advertisement of what we're trying to do.
Thank you very much.
I just have a question. I don't really have a comment. Tom Rubin, Lafayette House. How long does this take to change a code? To make something from where it is now to the next phase? How old? Oh, it's gonna take that long? I mean, because these homes that we're all talking about, none of them, there's only 2 that have C of Os, so. It'd be nice to have something done or him not saying, yeah, we know how you can avoid this situation, so these rentals will become rentals.
Well, we're making a very strong attempt to have our information turned over to the city council, so the city council can go through their review and action them into the code. We're not trying to change the code as a whole. We're trying to do it in segments because it would take too long to do it as a whole. So
So if you brought it to an owner occupied property instead of being an inn or whatever, let's say for instance, a Magnolia Inn or something like that, you'd have to make it owner occupied. How long would something like that take?
I'm not sure I understand your question.
Well, instead of an investor buying the property and renting out all 3 homes, you had talked about making ADUs, owner occupied, and the owner had to be on site to have the 2 ADUs with them. How long would something like that take?
Well, that would be part of changing the code. So whenever that section of the code gets changed, that would be part of that section.
I think that, what Mike's explaining is that this is a process that we've been working on for an entire year already.
I understand.
And it involves the entire code. Not to give you legal advice, but you may want to talk to an attorney.
We've been told that so many times by so many people.
To change the code, other than this review process that we are going through right now. And I urge you to seek some legal advice on that matter.
That's great. I mean, but that's a lot for our expense to have the rest of the community benefit from it. And not saying that I don't want to be a pioneer or anything else like that. It's just that I'm kind of wondering where you all are in this phase and if you have a determination at all to even do something about it, or if you're just,
Maybe
okay.
I'll try to shot at it. So we started with chapter 7 and 9, which had to do with process. And earlier in the meeting, we talked about the fact that we've had our recommendations on chapter 7 and 9 in front of the city council for a while. They were supposed to have a second reading tomorrow night. We got some late comments from the Chamber of Commerce on that. So likelihood is we're gonna look at those changes. They'll come back to us again, and maybe we'll be able to get a second reading back before the city council in August. Could be September before they act. But we've been working on just those chapters for well over a year. After you all are done with public comments today, I think we're gonna move to the protected waterways section, which was, we were already halfway through that. We decided that we needed to do some more work on that, and then we're gonna, let me just finish that, then we're gonna get to, the order is to chapter 2. And what you're talking about is in chapter 4. And so the order of things, so the order, so just a second, so the order of things, I'm getting to the ADUs, and we do want to talk about this because some of us have views that are probably very similar to yours, okay? So don't be surprised if we do address your issues exactly the way you want. But in the order that we've been proceeding, it might be the end of the year before we even get to those. We're usually spending about, in a meeting like this, about once a month, 4 hours in this, and then once a month, 4 hours in our regular meeting. So we're probably spending 8 hours in meetings and probably a comparable number of hours on our own going through these various things, trying to get our heads around these issues. So we can only go, and then when we give them, they go as recommendations to the city council. So we have no influence on how fast they do, but
Okay.
we will move
Got it.
expeditiously on it because although it's affecting you all and has been for some time, a lot of us have been giving a lot of thought to the very same issue. So I don't want you to think that we're taking this.
Okay, got it.
Yeah.
So let's go back to the protected waterways. This subdivision or compound, as they call it, that's being built their silt has gone into our pond, which is a protected waterway. We have a main drain that's right there at that compound that goes straight to the marsh. And that sediment and silt has gone through the sewer line out to the marsh. I have pictures of it. You can tell the difference in sand and everything else like that. But nothing seems to be done about that either. I mean, if you guys wanna look at something like
Do they
that,
have silt fences up and all that?
they had silt fences that broke and everything else
Well,
like
they should be
that.
regularly inspected and I don't know what.
Well, I don't know what,
Yeah.
well,
City
the
doing
inspector,
it.
not really sure what's going on there, but, you know, maybe y'all should go out and look at it. I mean, that would be a better idea to have a field trip and you guys can go see what's actually going on in your neighborhoods.
Yeah, we're unfortunate, well, not unfortunate, we're not an enforcement part of this.
I understand, but you guys, eyes on sight, right?
Some of us will go by and take a look at it just because you picked our interest. I think.
And
And maybe
you're
all
all
of us
welcome to
will.
contact me and come on our property, so you can take a look at that too.
Yeah.
But thanks for your time.
Yeah, thank you.
Anybody else that would like to? Thank you, public
Yeah.
comment?
I have one more comment, I'm sorry. I know you were saying you don't know how long Jill Rubin, the house, how long you would say to make changes that it would be owner occupied. The only reason why we're bringing that up is because, Airbnb person is looking at buying this. They already have a house in Beaufort. So they're looking at buying these 3 homes to literally turn into 3 more short-term projects. There won't be an owner living there. This is gonna be a disaster for us to live next to, having nonstop turnover. So I just wanna point that out. It is being looked at and it might very well be under contract already, or at least heading in that direction.
I would definitely send a letter to the licensure agency for the city that is licensing short-term rentals. Because they have to do the licensing. At least they can take a look at it.
Okay. Will do.
Ma'am, you wanted to make a comment earlier? You're good? Any others? Thank you, I appreciate it. I'll close the public comment section. I would like to get an update, if we have any, on Riverfront Park. Do you have anything?
Nope. You've read the newspapers, but I've got. I have no update on what's going on with the other night, closed it down, and there's a process of coming up, working on it. They don't even have a design yet, from what I understand. They have a series of items that they're approaching, but they don't have a target design that won't go into them.
We had any meetings yet?
We had a meeting 2 weeks ago, one, we had a presentation by the engineering firm. But there's an overview of what's going on with this. What is going on with them. They have no comments, to the condition of the park. They were talking about what was occurring with the platform, with the piles. And what was caused, and that they're evaluating various ideas as to how they would solve the problem. And that's where it was left at the last meeting. And then that following Friday was when they came to the city and the city proceeded to shut down the park. But at the meeting, it really did not say that there were in imminent danger of anything happening. That was two weeks, 2 Mondays ago.
Is Kurt no more?
I'm not. I think we might be done before they figure out. What.
It's going to take long. Okay, wow.
And you did say, Bill, you have another meeting coming up.
Yes, I'm not sure what today is. It's a meeting.
In the meantime, I'll go ahead and just update you on the demolition section of chapter 7. There was a committee that was formed, but it was not made official by city council. The request for that, Kurt sent in to be on this agenda for tomorrow night. For whatever reason, it did not get on the agenda. But I've talked to them and they're for sure we'll have it on August. And so that has a lot to do with how we structure the demolition section. So that's kind of our whole one.
So we need to be ready for the second reading of chapter 7, regardless of what the Chamber of Commerce's schedule of input has been. Right, because of the historic review folks,
Well,
are the part of the subcommittee.
But I believe that the city council is approving the chapter in their second reading, as they did the first reading, without the update to that particular section. That looks like it might take a little bit of time before we get to it.
If you would, probably should provide a little bit of clarity on the accessory dwelling units, so you can take it home, and think about it. If we deal with this in the future, since I think that's most.
Yeah.
So 3.11.2 and then 4.5.3 are the big sections for that. But essentially, first is that we're already allowing basically 2 accessory dwelling units per lot, except for T3S, which is basically all the suburban districts of town. Why Pigeon Point was part of it was on T3N, I don't know. But so that's, and that was per the original code, just so you're aware. And basically there's some rules on where they have to be placed, but they can only be half the size of principal structure. So I think the structure that we're talking about, the compound, are actually much smaller, I think. But if you had it's 50% up to 1,500 square feet, how large it can be. So if you got a big house on the lot, a 3,000-foot house, you can have 1,500 square feet. Accessory dwelling unit. Otherwise, you're just doing half of the house. You get a 1,200-foot house.
Could you have 250?
You can have 2.
1,500
Each
square feet.
2, that's right. So
Plus, however big.
each one can be 50% of the house. And there's really no rules on the owner. It's a permitted use. So right, we can only, when it comes in, we can only deny it if it's misplaced, doesn't get setback, or it doesn't meet that size or height, or we can't turn it down because we don't want.
One more question. ADUs, I understand it means accessory dwelling unit. So could you have your big house, 2 1,500 square foot ADUs, plus a garage and a shed and a pool house? I mean,
No, I think it actually does have a pool house in here, not pool house, but it's a little more than that. I think it's like something like that, but it's limited to 2. Whether how you do the 2, if you do it inside the house, do it over a garage. There is specific rules for a carriage house. In this case, I think we're talking about 2 carriage houses plus a house. So that's where it'd be capped. You couldn't do 2 carriage houses, then a garage ADU. Under the current code unless it was grandfathered. But that's where it stands, and that's for T3S is limited to just 1. So for kind of stay on the zoning or will. That's where it stands. It's very nice. I want to provide a little bit of clarity. How is it defined? I mean, it's defined in that 3.11.2 and then 4.5.3 carriage house is kind of talked about. Or it can be placed on the lot, et cetera, but it doesn't have an owner occupied requirement.
Let me ask you, has the city council considered this such that they would be interested in taking a change to these 2 parts of the code independent of, say, the entire chapter? I mean, I wouldn't be opposed at all to making this a priority because I share a lot of the concerns. What people say, in other words, for the audience is when the city council can't enact a change to the code without it coming through us. So either they can direct us to specifically consider something, or we would undertake it in the normal course of what we're doing, because the direction so far what we've gotten is just, consider everything. And so we've taken things in the order that we have for certain just, logical reasons, but that doesn't mean that we couldn't take a specific thing out of order on our own initiative just because it's of great concern to us. And I wouldn't be opposed at all to taking those two sections, which I'm looking at with my code book open right now. Maybe not today, but maybe at a near-term work session, because it does take us a long time. We may not get to all of chapter 2, 3, 4, this year, I don't know. And in fact, what we have been talking about is once we got through chapter 8, is doing 2, 3, and 4 all together, meaning it'll take us longer because we're not doing one chapter at a time, but we could take those provisions out of order. And once we get done with the protected waterway thing, which is already currently on the table, is take up the ADU short-term rental and have just a meeting about that. I think there'd be a lot of interest in that.
I
It's probably
agree with
overdue.
Bill that would be a good idea. Although I will say, well, just another comment. I mean, there's a lot of interest in particularly short-term rentals. We talked about it literally every council meeting that's been had lately. I watch them all on Facebook. There are mechanisms for council to enact an ordinance outside of our process here. There's also a mechanism for a citizen to propose an ordinance in our current code. So it can be done without us, but I think it would be beneficial for us to have input on that. So I really like that idea.
Well, I don't know that the ADU could, because it's a land.
It has to go through
A
us.
short-term rental, I think, could. A lot of communities have done separate short-term rental. ADU would have to come.
Okay,
Right.
but if it's
But I think we
short-term
ought to-
rentals that are a huge part of the problem, and it dovetails with the ADU
I think
situation.
they do. I think it would make sense to do it together.
I mean, if you'd like to, I mean, it's really up to you, since we're doing 2, 3, and 4, if you would like to direct me. I'd like to direct. Planning Commission make a decision to direct, ask, if they should. Open up, official motion that you would like to.
Can we even do a motion here and a
Or just recommend, if I think the majority of planning commission recommend that we take out ADUs.
I would like to recommend that we do that, maybe even have a public, we haven't, I don't know what's on the agenda for our next regular meeting. But we could, potentially put that on the agenda for having a hearing, just to hear public testimony on just a limited issue of ADUs and short-term rentals. And we might not have a draft in front of us that day, but there's no reason we couldn't have hear the public comments on it, unless, because recently we haven't had a lot of agenda items for our regular.
Yeah, I don't
meetings.
think we're gonna have anything either, so I think that's up to all of you, if you provide that direction. Still move forward, and I did, the side note that I wanted to state is when I started, and when we started on these chapters, what came before the council in 2023, including limiting the lots, which are in chapter 7 and 9, were to actually remove that restriction of T3S. So there was a list of about 120 things that were compiled from members, planning commissioner, MPC at the time, city councilor, developers, citizens, and that was actually to go the opposite direction. Which is, I think, why some people are here, because they saw that that was in the packet from a year and a half ago. It was to actually take away the restriction of T3S, so you would have 2 and 2 T3S. So it sounds like you might want to go, it sounds like you're going in a different direction from that original kind of comment. I just wanted to make sure everybody's aware of that, so.
Yeah, I don't know what the mood of the overall community is. I have, generally speaking, just people that I talk to are people who live in neighborhoods and would like to have sounder neighborhoods than a lot of branches coming through, but that may not be the majority of the people that live here and property owners, but what I hear is there's just, you know, our neighborhoods, feeling of communities deteriorating, by, you know, single-family neighborhoods being turned into investment opportunities.
Yeah, I mean, if you'd like to take that up, I mean, I'll be honest, I've never worked in anywhere that had more than one ADU allowed. So I didn't even know that was possible until I came here, so. I've learned a lot of houses, so.
Kurt, what about the short-term rental policy that limits, you know, the percentage of lots? Is that something?
That's in our,
That's
I think there's probably gonna have to be some work on our section of the short-term rental ordinance. I was on vacation, I had a talk with Christopher was representing. But they're gonna have to do something with that in our code, and they'll have to come through you. But I think they're talking about other regulations for short-term rental. They'll be separate, but they'll have to do something. They'll have to.
We definitely have to use for, there's so much public comment on it and constantly. And, I'm not even sure how we designate a neighborhood going 6%, right now, according to the code. But,
And that's
I think we need to look at it.
And that 6%, as I understand, is what applies to non-owner occupied. So, you know, I mean, you can have 100%, you know, has short-term rentals between owners and non-owners, you know. My interest is, personally, I'll just say, is to get rid of non-owner occupied short-term rentals. I mean, some people will be grandfathered, you know, but this is not just an issue in Beaufort. I think a lot of communities are finding that this stuff got way out of hand. And they're having a hard time getting control over it.
So again, you're looking at chapters 2, 3, 4, and 8. And so, like, within your purview, I think it's up to you. If you wanna prioritize these, if you wanna see if the council agrees that you'd like to prioritize these and send them separately, once that decision, I can send also, or Mike and both of us can ask the manager and council that's your direction, or you, I think, can do it. I mean, that's your job. We keep some direction.
Well, if it's this board's desire to move in that direction, then I think we need to define which portions of chapters 3 and 4, identify those that need to have that done, that we will take those, do that request. We can find out maybe from city council tomorrow evening if that might be something they'd be willing to entertain. And then we can bring it up formally for a vote in our next meeting.
Well, Kurt identified the two specific sections that deal with ADUs. And then the short-term rental, which would be
It's just also in chapter 3.
and then we'd also add to that the short-term rental provisions of the code.
Yeah, I mean, those 3 things, I think, could probably deserve their own meeting. As you can see, there's a lot of public interest. So,
Well,
I don't think they want
as
to
Kim
talk
said,
about
I know.
wetland protection, you know, like, design standards for windows and buttons and stuff like that. That's probably gonna be too difficult to have the public waiting for hours.
Right.
I'm willing to see us.
Short-term rental. I mean, the accessory dwelling unit is related, but sort of a separate issue. I believe that one of the major concerns is the short-term rental, and that can be a standalone, I think. I mean, I've had too many emails about the short-term
Do
rental
it
issue.
both together, just because I think they are related enough.
Yes.
Yeah, but I wouldn't want the short-term rental to get bogged down with, you know, one and a half. I don't know, I feel like deal with short-term rental.
On the City of Beaufort website, to your question about neighborhoods, there is a map of neighborhoods.
It shows you
you.
how many have been issued and where they're at the 6% cap.
And that's probably something that we would want to have published for our group.
So is that part of chapter 2? If there's some provision to that, this
It's
map?
part of chapter 3 and 4, our short-term rentals, chapter 3. Accessory dwelling units is really all throughout 2, 3, and 4, because there's a reference in 2.
So there's sections in all 3 of them?
Yeah, all 3, and you're advertised to be doing that right now, so, you know, again, I can inquire of the manager of council, that seems like a good direction. You know, we had a work session last month that had a lot of attendance about short-term rental. You know, they're talking about a separate ordinance, so.
Can we request, when we start talking about these short-term rentals, maybe a copy of the site plan as a case study of that compound that the public comments was talking about? I think looking at the site plan might be helpful.
Yeah, I mean, I think we have multiple examples of 2 dwelling ADUs. We have multiple examples of 2 ADUs, so.
Maybe you could give us multiple examples, so we're not singling out a particular property. The other thing is, you mentioned, Kurt, just now, that there's talk of a separate ordinance. Is there a draft ordinance out there? And if so, could we have it to look at?
I don't believe so, sorry, I was on.
Okay.
He was in the meeting.
We had a meeting with Scott Marshall about a week ago, and the suggestion was to take out the short-term rental topic and put it into its own ordinance. And kind of just have, you know, new provisions like the capping and in its own ordinance rather than having references in the development code. So we don't have to always go back into the code sections, the development code sections, and change every time we want to change, you know, short-term rental capping provision and so forth.
I know there's a lot of issues.
But-
There's issues about grandfathering, there's issues about
There are a lot of issues.
management, not just owner occupied, but I mean, there's a lot of issues.
But that's only a suggestion, so as you said before, if it ties into the ADU issue, then maybe it does indeed make sense to actually, you know, kind of approach it within the development code rather than having it as a standalone ordinance, so.
I think whether
It's
it's a
really-
standalone ordinance or not, I think it's subject of our purview under the state statute anyway. And, you know, so, I mean, I think it's easiest to deal with in the context of where it already exists, which is in the land use code. And unless the city council, the city manager have a specific reason why they want us to not deal with it, I think, you know, we don't have to wait for direction from the city council, and when we want to make a code change.
That's exactly right.
We can just do it.
You can just do it.
I mean, is there a consensus that we'd like to address this at our next regular meeting, since there's nothing else?
I'm on board with that.
Yes.
Yeah, so could you put it on the agenda?
Okay, we'll put it on the agenda because it'll have to be like a discussion item because I think we're too late to advertise.
That's okay, I think
I don't think we have a code to add to advertise. We don't, right? So
Or we can put it on there as an agenda item that we're, and you can list the specific sections that
We'll list
deal
the
with that.
sections.
And then we're taking.
We're taking any official
Public
action.
testimony on the issues of ADUs and short-term rentals. That will then help inform us when we sit down and start considering specific changes.
In the meantime, since there seems like a majority, I'll just copy Mike and Bill's.
Yeah.
We'll send a polite message to.
Can't take a vote here right now, so.
Yeah, but you heard a lot of residents. Right, so we'll send that over and give it this.
So I'm not sure if we've made any headway yet, but let's see if we can here.
Not on chapter 8, but yeah, we have made headway, just not on chapter 8.
Going back to critical line setbacks and license. The information that we've got a lot of it from Libby.
You all get the map that, okay, so you got the map, and also there's
Can you read it
the,
out?
uh, we printed out the Bluffton, Soboka standards, and, marginal water engineer who worked on these from the Corn Taylor provided a demo, on the differences between the two. Got that. And also there was an email sent out a few weeks ago from the city attorney addressing some of the questions. That's from. Do you have all this? Everybody have everything?
I don't have the city attorney letter, whatever, it's like, have questions.
Remember when you sent that email
I
through?
mean, I could see them.
Well, it wasn't so much related to stormwater, but
Okay.
I can print it out here. The last couple of weeks.
So our JS technician actually made a map. This is it, and I shared that with you all last week, so.
Can you explain that map to us a little bit?
It incorporates two buffers that we were talking about. So currently in section 8, we have a buffer line for conventional districts of 50 feet minimum and transect based zoning districts of 30 feet. So I asked her to kind of put that footage of that buffer around designated wetlands. Like if you, for instance, this is just an example of the Mossy Oaks neighborhood here. This is Broad Street over there. You look at little tiny wetlands. You can actually click on it and it'll give you a description of what kind of type of wetland we're looking at, and the different shaded colors show you the 30 and the 50 foot buffer around it.
And where is the 30-foot and 50-foot? Is it from the edge of the critical area line all the way?
Those are all wetland types. So we have the critical lines, which is basically the critical line to, waters of the United States, which is basically your rivers, your saltwater marshes, anything that's, connected to the oceans. And then you've got your isolated immersion wetlands, freshwater wetlands that are not connected to any waters of the United States. And those are the ones that we were looking at specifically, because those are the ones that, that the EPA and everything that are not protected by federal law anymore. So
as I, looking at the clean version that was provided us for today, the only thing I see that is defined in this clean version is the critical area buffer. And what they are defined as is 30 feet and 50 feet. Is that a mistake? We talk about in this clean version, a whole bunch of different types of buffers, but only one is defined, and that's in 8.2.2 A and B. But elsewhere in the narrative, we refer to other things like wetland buffers, tidal area buffers. So I think we need to tighten up our language here and say what we mean. The critical area buffer is one thing, and a wetland buffer is, as I understand it, a kind of a subset of a critical area buffer, but we're using a lot of terms, but there's only one that's defined.
Well, in the end, at our last meeting, we decided to pause our final decision on chapter 8 because we wanted to reconsider whether to include, I think, wetland buffers. Right now, we have buffer around a critical area, but we didn't around the wetlands. We just were protecting the wetland itself from development. So we eliminated, if I recall, the buffer around the wetlands. And so that's one of the things we wanted to come back with. I think in the context of all of that, though, we may want to also just consider under 8.2.2, because Libby had some good thoughts on that, is in her, I think it was June 3rd email memo about maybe we do those buffers a little bit different in the critical area as well.
Sort of a piggyback on that, what Rob just said, it seems to me that the wetland buffer is mentioned here in this clean version under stormwater. To me, thinking about this, I'd go, you for a section critical area buffer, a section wetland buffer, whatever, freshwater wetland buffer, then stormwater, and then blah, blah, blah. Right now, we've got the wetlands mixed in with the stormwater.
That's,
And I mentioned.
yeah, that's a mistake there.
Talks about a stormwater permit, and I'm like, ooh.
It should be it should be a separate
Yeah,
section.
separate section.
Yeah.
And then it mentions in the, about a buffer, as the plan said, and there's no mention about, is there gonna be a buffer, and if so, what is it?
Yes, because we sort of thought we would get rid of the buffer requirement, but I think at our last meeting, we sort of said maybe we should. Because we had gotten some comments that really we didn't really take into account. I think at least among some of us, there was a view we should go back and consider that there should be a buffer around wetlands, same way that there is around the critical line.
Well, if there's any interest for the county for freshwater wetlands, it's for single family 20 feet and 50 feet for other uses, and this is for freshwater wetlands. If, you know, you wanted to go that route, but yeah, I think that idea of calling those sections out separately,
Right.
critical area buffer, wetland buffer, and then stormwater.
Right.
And just a comment about the stormwater changes. In the original code, there was a lot of sort of leeway given for infill development, trying to make sure that, because we had gotten a lot of comments from developers about how onerous this wetland stormwater standards were for infill projects. So that's why a lot of that was in there, and maybe it hasn't been used, but so now this is moving to a whole nother, you know, level of just either this Bluffton or the county standards are adopted and getting sort of rid of those.
One question, Libby, for you, since you were,
I'm not stormwater.
no, you know, but you were critical in putting the code that we're looking at now together. In 8.2.3, there's a reference to, in the first line, to a tidal area buffer. What is that?
Yeah, it would be the same as, that's just.
Okay, so it's a synonym for that.
Yeah.
So let's not use synonyms. Let's use one.
It's with it.
Yeah.
Absolutely, yeah.
The OC, and another question just for whether you or maybe what Kurt's going. OCRM, the South Carolina Office of Coastal Resource Management versus the DES BCM. Those are two different regulatory groups. One establishes the critical line and one does permitting, or?
No.
Can you explain that? I mean,
Okay, you're talking about 8.2.1?
Well-
Or 8.2.2?
yeah,
Okay, so the DHEC is no longer. DHEC has been divided into two agencies. One of which is the Department of Public Health, DPS. The other one is the Department of Environmental Services, DES.
that's what I said.
Under the auspices of DES,
It's BCM.
Is-
the OCRM.
right, but from what I understand it, that agency sets the critical lines. And like, if you want to develop, you ask them for a report on the critical lines, and the critical lines change over time. They're good for like 5 years.
What I'm asking is, that there was, and I gather still is, an OCRM agency and a BCM agency.
No, OCRM is the old name for
Uh,
what it's now.
So it's been replaced?
It's the Bureau of Coastal.
No, I understand that, but OCRM is no longer.
No, that's the old name.
That's the old name.
When, yeah.
Okay,
So we have to update them.
then we need to update
Agency
that.
names, I guess.
Because I was just reading online and I couldn't determine whether that was still.
Well, they're transitioning because the change only took place about a year ago.
Okay, so that's why I'm not finding OCRM still.
You still get that. when
Online, you
look,
still
yeah.
see a lot of stuff as though it's still an active entity.
So should we do a word search for OCRM in the code and
This is
already
probably
replaced it in sections where I saw it, but. All right.
So jurisdictionally, would be the UCM, I guess. They have jurisdiction to determine what happens.
They're gonna split up the critical line, and then they have jurisdiction from the critical line towards the water.
Right, and then
Local is
the
everything.
city has
Right.
jurisdiction from the critical line to the edge of the buffer that we establish here, basically.
Somewhat, yep.
Okay, and let's say in a tidal area, or saltwater area, where you have a critical line, and we have these buffers here that we've talked about, 30, 50 feet. Is there an additional wetland buffer on top of that critical area buffer, or does the wetland buffer only refer to freshwater buffers?
I mean, I think the way that it's being looked at, the critical area buffer is for tidal OCRM regulated, and freshwater is for all others. Yeah,
Okay.
that are currently, I guess, not regulated or not like they used to be.
Okay.
So in the current version, that's why we're under 8.2, we only have critical area buffers.
Okay,
The isolated wetlands, I think were never really addressed in this section, so what we did last time did insert in section 8.4 what is it, 8.3.3. Because we took out the stormwater standards because now we're referring to the Soloco manual for that. And we kind of put in these wetland standards, we kind of named them wetland standards, but it's basically.
but we don't have any defined wetlands, so, or wetland buffers. And so, I mean, so wetland standards apply to what?
Well, that's what we were doing, is you had to show on your plat or whatever that whether there was a wetland. And be regulated.
So you have to show it. And then there's restrictions on what you can do in the wetland, but is there a buffer? No?
There was the 50-foot, that was from the block and all that. I think that's what you discussed. That we thought that
And
was-
then we got rid of it. So
So
let's,
you got rid of that whole, yeah, you got rid of the whole thing.
so that I think is one of the main things we wanted to consider today.
Right.
If we want to have a wetland area buffer and have some standards applicable for in the buffer.
Yeah, so you can see all of that was what was proposed. Okay, it was actually 100 feet, and then some was 50 feet.
If there's a wetland, like a freshwater wetland in a property, is there anything in the code that says that you can't touch it, you can't fill it, or can they fill it?
But there's nothing in our current code.
They can basically just fill it,
It's
but
completely
you don't
unregulated.
need a buffer.
Completely unregulated. Yeah, and I know I looked back on my Colorado, where I was in Colorado, it was actually 150 feet, they don't really have too much wetlands. Well, we're here, so it's 150 feet buffers.
So can you get that map back up again, Christopher? So this is
like a non-critical area. Like, it's not, like, this is the Mossy Oaks area, this is like an isolated emergent wetland. Just not connected to marshes or waters of the United States, so the critical area buffer will apply to this because these kinds of wetlands are not regulated in the current section. But so what I asked our GIS technician to do is just put the 30 and the 50-foot buffer around all types of wetlands that we have in Beaufort County, including these non-regulated wetlands. Yeah.
and this is maybe a dumb question, but I'm going to ask it. A wetland like this that's on the screen right now, looks like it's kind of in the middle of a neighborhood. And is it correct to refer to such a wetland as a freshwater wetland? Or are there situations where really not technically freshwater and maybe brackish water, or, you know, I don't know what's underneath. And so I mean, if we're gonna use terms, I just wanna really be sure that we're using terms, you know.
I thought FEMA had a number of different delineations of wetlands, like.
Yeah, we have
Few
that layer
dozens.
too, I'm just trying to figure it out.
Yeah, shit.
That's Arthur Horn Park for whatever
It
that's
is,
worth.
right,
I don't
it
know.
is. But it's a good example, because
Yeah,
it's,
it's big.
it's a freshwater immersion wetland, that's basically the type of it.
But that's not regulated, is it?
No, it's
So that could be
currently,
filled in.
Well,
it's.
Is that freshwater or tidal?
No,
No,
it's
it's
fresh, not tidal, it's actually.
I don't know if it makes a difference for our purposes, because if we have one buffer established for the critical line, those are gonna be, you know, whether that's right along a stream or whether it's a wetland along a stream or a river. I mean, I think that we just have a buffer for a critical line and a buffer for a wetland, whether it's fresh or whether
Yeah,
it's brackish.
I
don't
think we
it
should
make
get rid of
any
that
difference.
term.
Yeah,
Freshwater, I don't think we need it. But the one other thing, Christopher, that you said that this is an emergent buffer, which means it's, to me, that means it showed up one day and it's maybe is growing.
No,
What does that mean?
fresh water is coming out of like if it rains a lot, the groundwater table will rise, so it's a depression, it's a topographical depression, you know, so basically the groundwater is gonna come up in those depressions, so the water actually is emerging up from the groundwater table, but it's not fed through saltwater marsh or like the river water, so it's fed locally just through rainwater runoff.
Okay.
Yeah.
So it's not changing.
It only changes when it rains a lot, basically. It goes up and down depending on precipitation, basically. It's not tidally, influenced by the tides or by the river and the ocean. It's disconnected. So it's a different type.
Does that have stormwater coming into it? Stormwater
Yeah,
line?
I'm pretty much sure. It's like, what they did in Port Royal, they used one of these emergent wetlands for stormwater management purposes, right? I mean, they actively, dug it out and made this, rookery out of it. But basically, it is to control stormwater runoff too.
What about that one there? That's stormwater runoff or is it natural?
Well, the Arthur Horn one is actually a natural, it's an undeveloped, owned by the county, it's a natural
It's like,
wetland that is
like
protected, but
low-lying
it's not
and-
really.
Low lying area.
It's a low-lying depression, so we have these depressions all throughout, Beaufort and the city too, but.
Can you scroll out so they can see how much?
See, there's been talk even of trying to do, off and on, maybe some walking trail, and you can get back there, there's a parking area on Azalea, and you can park and walk back in there, it's sort of overgrown, but I mean, it's. Anyway, that's a
really
big
like
one.
to get the skin lights.
How does the surveyor get where that actual line is? Do they get it from the GIS?
It's basically a GIS layer. I mean, you can see it's, the highlight is actually the parcel map, the tax assessor's map.
When you have a properties in the survey, when you have wetlands assessment, they're gonna go out there. It was talking about.
So this does, you said highlight right now, but it's, yeah, the buffers are on there.
Yeah, 30-foot buffers.
The dark one and
And
that's
the
great.
lighter one is 50, but
so,
Okay.
so a lot of, some wetlands are mapped.
Right.
And then a lot of them are disputed, and that's why, there's been some changes, obviously, in the federal government level recently, but the Corps of Engineers has a wetlands delineation manual that, all the experts use for delineating wetlands, and what we had, I think, provided in our code provision was, we assumed that, when you make an application filing of some kind, you were gonna have to get a delineation report, like that's what we.
Yes.
And so we refer to it as an environmental engineer, but there are people obviously that are expert at utilizing that Corps of Engineers manual. trying to determine these things. In the end, if it's disputed, it'll become an issue for the code administrator here or the planning commission to make that final determination.
Christopher, are you?
Since we don't have another agency, is that right? Kurt?
Put lot lines on this map?
But those were mapped, is that what you're saying, Kurt, by who
So-
actually?
Our GIS technician used the county's GIS layers, so there are two layers, like
Yeah.
the city of Beaufort, the parcel layers of all the tax map numbers, all the properties basically. And the county's wetlands layer, so the wetlands layer. Like I turned off the parcel layer just to, if you leave the wetlands layer on, you can actually click, like this is Crystal Lake on Ladies Island, out of Ladies Island Drive. And you can see the area next to the actual lake is also regarded as if you click on it, it'll give you a description of what it is. It's actually also freshwater forested / shrub wetland.
And so the county actually mapped it on their GIS as a.
Yeah.
Somewhere.
Yeah, the county actually mapped all types of wetlands. So if you go, let's say closer to the marshes. Let me just pick Airport Junction here, because so you can click on this area and, well, what does it say? It says freshwater forest.
Refresh it or something.
This is, for instance, a freshwater emergent wetland.
This is over by the airport.
So if you click on this area below it, you can see it's actually part of the estuarine, the marine wetland area. It's connected, of course, to the river and basically to the ocean, right? So these are different types of wetlands.
So like the one where your cursor is right now, that's something that has a critical line.
Now, well, that may not be, is that one subject to the critical line mapping, is it?
Well, the critical area buffer that we're showing here, that's the critical area because it's part of the marine, the wetlands that are connected to the ocean. So
Okay, that one.
these are the critical that, like Libby explained before, that are regulated through the state.
Okay,
So anything going towards, towards the river, towards the ocean, actually the Department of Environmental Services actually issues permits like for docks that go out into it, it's support. So they're regulated by the state because they're considered waters of the United States, right? But anything more isolated, like this little area, right, off of Sea Island Parkway, it's a freshwater emergent wetland. So that would not be regulated under our critical area section because it's an isolated wetland type. It's more a freshwater wetland rather than a salt.
but from the colors on your map, I can't tell which one is which, can I?
You can't. No, because it includes all wetland types, both nature.
So if you highlight that again, what you were highlighting for the critical line, this one. So this is the critical line.
That light blue line? is the
So
critical line?
if we didn't address every, the other wetlands, the buffer would be right here.
That would
Is
be,
that
yeah.
correct? Or it
So
would be
for
right
instance, this adjacent wetland is a freshwater forested shrub wetland, which would not be addressed in our section. Because it's not considered connected to the critical.
So again, I'm
Which is
just,
important, and that's why I think a lot of this came up, because this is called Airport Junction, it's part of the development agreement.
I'm just trying to understand the colors on there.
20 years ago, and they're wanting to develop this right now.
The
and they
colors show
an
the
exemption.
buffers, so I
They believe.
If
so.
there were buffers.
No, but
It's
that
a
light
buffer.
blue line, is that light blue line the critical line? Or is that just another delineation line of some kind? The light blue, as opposed to the purple and red.
It's basically your property line.
Okay, that is
Basically
critical.
the surveyed, yeah.
So so there isn't anything on there that shows where the critical line is.
We could probably have her.
I was just curious.
Well, but for that, it would happen to be the blue line for the highlighted section.
Well, I mean, he's saying that, but I don't have anything to tell me that for sure, just looking at the map.
If I turn on the parcel map, you can see, for instance, this is all, of course, one parcel, it's owned by one, company, but you can see it basically covers the same line, it's basically your surveyor boundary line, it's what's been surveyed by a land surveyor for either purposes, either for property, for ownership, property ownership, or for surveyed for as a critical line for the matters of, you know, US Army Corps of Engineers or whoever did it, so.
But to provide some context, I think where Christopher has it here is perfect, because why this was proposed to you a few months ago is, you know, Bluffton's decided this is important, and they were trying to say that it would still regulate any existing development agreement, so they would not be considered grandfathered in anymore for the wetland law. That's the determination they made in March. Well, we currently have a request from Airport Junction, which was part of a large development agreement. And includes even Hanover Park, where they built a bunch of apartments on the other side of 170. This whole area was included in it, and you know, they believe they're exempt from basically the flood ordinance, and clearly, you know, the wetlands would not apply to them because there's nothing in our current code. So, you know, they want to develop this whole area. Now, if you were to adopt what was originally presented, you know, that would obviously cause most of that lot to be undeveloped, right? And so I think that's, you know, this is maybe that, does that give you context of what you're doing here? So there are a fair amount of wetlands in this area, but you know, it would have some development impact one way or the other, right?
So if we don't grandfather in a development agreement, but you have most of Ladies Island Parkway in the buffer, as we can see from this map here, I mean, we grandfather in some things, but not other things,
if it's in an active development agreement, then it would be, you know, we don't have the power to regulate under our current ordinance. We don't really have anything in our current ordinance, as we were stating, except for the critical line buffer. And if it was built before this, then no, we wouldn't have the power to regulate unless something got torn down, or there was a storm, or et cetera, right? We didn't expand.
I think it depends on what the development agreement says. I mean, I've got a development agreement in front of me. Not one that you're talking about, but one that was proposed. In the county somewhere by Pulte Homes, and you know, they talk about what is exempt from future regulation. I think that I wouldn't feel comfortable, you know, saying that they're not subject to any regulation until I saw what the development agreement said when it was written. You know, and I think that's part of the question that we had to ask you to ask of the city attorney, was either give us a, you know, all of the various development agreements so that we can look at them, or give us an opinion as to, you know, what they specifically say in terms of limiting our ability to impose new regulations like we're talking about on old development agreement areas.
You know, that's what he says, the DA is subject to any subsequently adopted state or federal laws.
This idea of protecting wetlands isn't just for one property, right? It's
No,
so
we're looking at the whole, we're looking at.
Worry about that, because those development agreements are a whole different ballgame, but if we think just in general that freshwater wetlands should be protected.
The only reason the development agreement came up here was just because.
Yeah.
Brought it up here in this context, and I think that is a separate issue that we wanted to separately just become comfortable with, because people keep saying things to us like, who's approving all of these apartments, you know, buildings, and we're like saying, as long as I've been on the planning commission, I don't know, we've had apartment approval coming for us. Well, they all seem to be part of these long ago approved development agreements. And we just started wondering, how do we answer people when they say you're responsible for all the development that's occurring here? And we're like, apparently not.
well, the DRB approved a number of them. Design, the planning commission, it's only been.
Yeah, well, you made I don't know, maybe, but any event, that's how sort of this got into it. But yeah, the issue for today doesn't have anything to do with development agreements. And I think that this was interesting to see, but I think the real issue that we want to consider is, we already decided that we want to have a buffer around, along a critical line. And what should it be for what different zoning districts? And then, do we want to have a buffer around wetlands, and what should it be? The
Yeah,
same
even
or
if,
different?
let's say there was no development agreement, but, you know, the property hadn't been developed. You're, you know, this is what you're saying that could be now be developed, basically.
Right,
So
so, right.
just, one of my other questions was, I don't remember why we decided to have two different critical area buffers, one being 30 and one being 50. What is the logic of that? And
I think that we were thinking that, you know, some heavily, well, for example, downtown, I think we were thinking that, you know, we have small lots, you know, pretty heavy development. And if we have a really a significant buffer, you know, that might be impossible for a lot of those lots to be developed at all. Is that right?
Yeah, that's been in place since 2003, those standards. So, and those were brought forward because again, the whole code is context-based. Every property isn't the same, and as was mentioned that some of these more urban areas, if you'd have a 50-foot critical area buffer, your maybe, the property may be undevelopable. I mean, there'd be provisions that would allow a small home, but it just sort of made sense to say in urban areas, we need to allow a little more flexibility. We've got a lot of, well, maybe not a lot, but some infill lots, let's say Spanish Point on the water may have some vacant lots, and if some are built at 30 and some are 50, and so it just,
Yeah.
thinking was just carry that forward. Also, the county has the same structure for their more transect districts, like their T3 edge, I think their setback might be 20 or 30 feet, but then it goes up for the more conventional zone. So it's sort of similar, more urban has urban standards, suburban has urban standards. So it would be, you know, major change to go.
Well, I think we're looking at 30 and 50 feet, I think.
That's what it is today.
And
For title.
the discussion was to take it all to 50, or should we allow the 30 feet? Just in subdivisions, like New Point and others that already are existing are using a 30-foot setback, not a 50-foot setback. And there are parcels that are still out there that are not developed. To move that back to 50 feet, does that make it an undevelopable lot or not? And in my mind, that's still kind of the question. I like the general standard of 50 feet because we're trying to protect the wetlands and critical as much as possible. But are we doing harm in some cases by going that extra 20 feet?
so if we were to use the same logic applied here to the critical area buffers, to the wetland buffers, we could do that. We could have 30 in the content base districts and 50 in the conventional districts. How would that impact that? First of all, what's the zoning of that airport loop area that we were looking at? What is the zoning?
It's a PUD because of the development agreement.
Okay, so it doesn't have any designation.
It has some designation to buffer requirements in the development agreements, but only towards critical areas, I believe, too. So like this section talks only about the critical areas, and those are the ones that Libby was talking about. Those are the, you know, the areas that are fronting your saltwater marshes and the rivers, and not the isolated wetlands, right?
So do you want to protect those isolated wetlands or not?
So that's the first question, right? And the second, is there a buffer?
Yeah.
So we got sort of two questions.
true.
Yeah, so one is about filling, yes or no, and then if no, do you want to go beyond that and say buffer?
So the original draft, you were doing both, and then I think the last meeting you took out the buffer, which kept protection. That makes sense.
Question.
Yeah.
Are all of the, forget about the isolated wetlands. Are all the flowing waters in the city of Beaufort, meaning streams, anything that's somehow connected to the water of the United States? I'm thinking about that little pond that's in the middle of the little point there. are all those critical areas, are there any moving waters that are not considered?
Well, most of your creeks and rivers, like Yucca River, you know, like Factory Creek and
They
Battery
all
Creek,
attach.
they're all connected to the ocean, basically. They're all tightly
We
influenced.
are islands.
Yeah, so that, those are all critical area buffers, so that would apply to those, but
Okay,
the isolated wetlands, like I've shown you before, the freshwater wetlands are not covered by this.
okay.
So is the coastal conservation's position to protect both critical, I mean, to buffer both critical and freshwater?
Yeah, I think so, yeah, sure, I'm Grant McClure with Coastal Conservation League. Okay, yeah, stand over
You
there.
gotta stand in the corner.
Sure, yeah, so up on that area here.
You don't have to sit on a stool.
Yeah, so I'm Grant McClure, I work for the Coastal Conservation League, I also live in Beaufort, and to answer the question, yes, we'd like to see a buffer on both the critical area and the freshwater, those isolated wetlands.
And you're asking for 50 feet, I can remember.
We had asked for 50 feet, but I think I could understand that in the more urban areas, a 30-foot buffer could be more appropriate. However, I would like to see 50 feet applied to the PUDs, and 50 feet in the conventional district as well. I think in your transect districts where it's more urban in nature, it wouldn't make sense to maybe go down to 30. But most of the PUDs, like Airport Junction are kind of out in the more encroaching on the more rural areas anyways, and would like to see a 50-foot applied there if possible. So that's kind of where we're at. Thank you.
That's kind of what I was thinking, same thing too.
Well, so do we want to change it in 8.2.2A as well? Because the PUDs, the critical area buffer only has 30 feet.
Well, the PUDs, they're gonna propose their own standards. That's the whole point.
So why are we
But they're gonna
covering
say
it?
it's something different, but I mean.
I guess this would be new PUDs.
Well, you can put that down, it would be.
Most PEDs probably didn't even talk about it either. If
Well,
it's not, if it's
critical
not
areas, so-
discussed, then we can regulate it. Some of them might have, but if they didn't, then you would follow
Yeah.
whatever standard.
Yeah, Beaufort County in their standards does have PUDs listed. They've got like a table. They do theirs a little differently, but they do list PUDs as a district on their chart.
So basically, unless they delineated that or have developed, it would default to. So if you
Right.
created standard,
So if we want to protect wetlands, I think new PUDs maybe want to
or
have a
just even
50-foot.
existing, if they didn't talk about it.
Well, yeah, I mean, the grandfathering in is a, a separate question. But I would think that the 30-foot minimum buffer should only apply to the transect-based districts with the PUDs, the conventionals.
Here's just a question, do we wanna hold non-single family uses in a transect district to a higher standard than single family uses in a transect district?
But if it's in a transit district. I see you're saying based on single family versus.
Same thing, like if you're an apartment complex,
Yeah.
could they build right up to that 30-foot?
Yeah, I'm just saying, should we hold, non-single family uses to a set, greater setback of 50 foot in a,
Well,
even though it's in a transect district, I'm just throwing that out
That
there.
kind of goes against the density concepts behind the various districts. I mean, the ones we'd really be talking about, I think, would be RMX and T5, right? Where there is a high density allowed by the code.
Well, we have apartment complexes in some transect districts. Is there? Yeah.
But then you would have to name out the districts, you would then have to say in T3 and in T.
I was just asking the question, whether,
30 foot and T4.
what about differentiating between uses within a
I think
transaction?
you would just title that single family setback and then multifamily commercial setback.
You could do it that way too.
So single family would be like a 30 and then multifamily would be 50.
I mean, you obviously maybe reduce the density. Expand the setback, but then again, they are, so they're
I mean, obviously,
more
anything that,
substantial in nature, so.
anything that's existing is gonna be grandfathered. But we're
They
really
would
don't
have much more
new
uses
uses.
on wetland than, you know.
in single family.
What if you base it by the number of stories versus?
I don't know about that, but
No, I'd rather leave it at multifamily. If we're gonna do a 50-foot for multifamily, I think we just designate that single family.
I would say,
Do single family at 30 and multifamily at
I
50.
wouldn't use slash.
To me, that makes sense. You wanna get a little farther back from that.
You wanna get rid of the districts altogether and just do it by land use?
I mean, that's what I'm suggesting, really. I guess,
Is that what y'all want?
I don't know, I think the rest of them have to weigh in. I think we just gotta,
What if we put conventional, comma, PUD and multifamily developments?
what do
we
you
have the
have
50.
That would,
agree with Bill or not?
What about like hotel?
yeah.
Well, that's considered, yeah, any commercial use would have the greater setback.
Yeah.
So conventional districts, PUDs,
Everybody's throwing out there.
and commercial and multifamily development.
We might need to change this a little bit.
And industrial?
Industrial?
We could just say single.
I mean,
family.
yeah. I mean, we can
Single
just-
family 30 feet, everything else is 50.
So get rid of transit-based districts altogether.
I just throw it
I think
out,
that's clearer.
what's the downside to doing it that way?
Commerce will complain.
What does this mean?
Next year sometime.
What about a duplex or a triplex?
That would be commercial.
Duplexes are not part of the building code, or really our codes.
Well, but I mean, duplexes are allowed in, single family home type districts like
Yeah.
T4.
Yeah, let's maybe put the single family, 2 and 3 family, because they sometimes are going together in a lot of things, yeah.
There you go.
Yeah, yeah, that sort of makes sense to me, put those in the 30-foot category and all other in the 50.
Yeah.
3, that sounds good.
Yeah, that's okay.
Interest in the septic tanks, in that rare situation that you might have septic tanks, I mean, had that zoning requested at a septic tank, I mean,
Are people allowed to build into the septic tanks now?
oh, yeah. If you can't get sewer, then you've got commercial.
Don't want to define any of the uses, so as far as commercial and industrial and, multifamily, because we're just leaving
It's all others.
Oh, yeah.
everything.
Well,
I don't know.
what about, do we want to say anything about utilities, trails? That kind of stuff, septic systems is what we said.
I think the trails are exempted somewhere
Did we
else.
exempt them?
Yeah, you can.
Even in the critical area?
Yeah, I think
Yeah,
you
you can have
can.
those.
Oh, yeah.
But
Yeah.
something or other.
We did, this septic tanks and septic field, is supposed to be 100 feet already.
That's in the county.
Oh, just.
Yeah, yeah, but they put a higher standard than we.
So what would you suggest with the adding like a C
Yeah,
here?
that's what I
Saying
was saying,
having
yeah.
a special provision relating to
Septic
septic
tanks.
tanks. So what would you like to see? To
Well, I would think 100 feet, like, same as county. I mean,
agree.
that,
We've already got septic leach in
And
the
the-
waterway.
and the surveyors are familiar with that requirement, so they'll, you know, put
Give
that line on
Christopher
there.
some language.
Septic tank.
Or just fields, yeah, what we can, I'll give you that, whatever field county has. Yeah,
Well, the drain field in some ways are more important.
Yeah, I
The
think
tanks
so.
themselves.
So septic tanks and drain fields.
I think it's called tile fields or something.
Lots developed on septic system.
Oh, that's a good one.
I think the county says septic tank / tile field setback.
I'd say
It says the drain field.
Drain fields, I would say,
Yeah.
drain fields, I think are more important as a setback and for a deeper setback. Tank.
So, and system.
In the county, it's 100 feet in any district. If you've got a septic tank, it's gotta be 100 feet from the critical line.
So the tank has to be. 100.
Well, the whole system, yeah.
Okay, so-
Yeah.
So we can just say the
Septic,
entire
septic
septic tank.
tanks, septic systems.
Just say septic systems.
Yeah.
That'll be inclusive
Yeah.
of the tank in the field.
Yeah,
I believe in fielding. Get that septic, make it,
And, okay, septic systems and drain
Can't be
fields.
too clear.
yes,
Yeah.
clear,
that's it.
How about septic systems including drain fields?
yes.
My contribution for today.
And what is the language of the prohibition? Must be,
Well, these are setbacks, isn't, they're all under setback from,
100 feet from.
must have 100 feet setback from the critical area line?
100 feet minimum is what it would say.
Okay,
Because that is,
perfect. So if,
what, yeah, could I just say, it would be the septic tank is setback, not the lot, right?
well, Bill's point about the drain field being more important than the
Well,
tank
yeah,
well.
it lots of, I don't know what that's.
You're talking about the lot of the.
See, because
footprint to the building.
Right,
and field.
the house is setback 30 feet. The hotel setback 50 feet, then the septic tank setback 100, so.
Right.
I think you just wanna say septic system.
Yeah,
Yep,
just
you got it,
septic
yeah, yeah,
systems, including drain fields.
right, right.
You know.
So you can't have a septic system unless you've got at least
100
110 feet.
Right.
100 feet
I mean,
away from it.
Obviously, there's gonna have to be adjustments if. I mean, just like the house, if you don't have enough room, there's a provision that,
Okay,
you know, you
Yeah,
adjust,
do I
but
have a permission?
we're gonna go, this is,
so we have a separate section for non-critical area buffer, just wetlands buffers. Would we want to use these same ABC?
Well, we could also, or you could also change. Highlight not only call it critical area buffer, but call it critical area and whatever. We could have all it together like that.
We could do that. We'd have to add something about the purpose of the wetland buffer.
and cause you have that provision about the fill too, so about the wetland, fresh water. So. Might want
Let's gotta
to
keep the
keep
wetlands
them
separate,
together.
huh?
That's what I have all title area 1 section, all over. Separate.
Okay, so before we get to the standards, we should define the buffers. Or not.
How will the buffer is?
You took this language
Yeah,
from
we took it a lot, right? Right. So it's right there, but we.
yes.
So. That's how you calculate. Point.
What if we, what if we changed stormwater to 8.4 and we made 8.3 wetland buffers? And just basically use the same numbers as we use for critical area buffers. So like, so 8.3.1 purpose would be, we wanna also protect wetlands not subject to, critical line regulations or something like that. And then applicability and size, then we would, wetlands buffers would be blah, 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 A, B, and C, but take out the critical line.
We call 8.3 stormwater and
No, keep stormwater separate. Make 8.3, make this 8.4. Then just add a section called 8.3.
So you'll have the wetlands that appears later. It's its own new section now, and maybe, I think, I'm saying make that 3 and then.
Or it could be
Or whatever, yeah.
2, it could be 8.2. So you wouldn't have to move this one.
yeah, it could be too.
Oh, wait,
It could be critical area buffer and wetlands, it could be all of it.
oh, except that. Yeah, we could do that. We could do it
You
that way.
wouldn't have to move. I guess.
This, yeah, I guess.
Rename 8.2 buffers.
Just because everybody here is so focused on I don't know, this critical area is like the big thing. People are looking for that specific, I don't know. I like keeping them separate just because.
That's my preference as well.
That's right.
It's
Well, you
clear.
want to keep it 8.3 and then just do that.
And then stormwater,
Then take all of the section we had in wetland buffer and just put 8.3. We can work on that.
Wetlands buffers or other wetlands buffers.
or for wetland standards, because you first got about no fill, I think. And then you're gonna have buffer.
Oh, wetland buffers and standards. No comma. After wetlands. And then 8.3.1. You know, make it similar to, the purpose, except. Obviously, there's
Single
some,
capture what was below. Put it back there. Revise that.
well, are those standards? Those standards are applicable to wetlands, not to the wetlands buffers.
Well, it creates the wetland buffers.
Well, they're all part of this,
They're all part of the wetlands.
Okay,
Yeah, just change it.
okay, I see what you're saying.
Sure.
Well, are we assuming that all intermittent streams are subject to the are dealt with under the critical line?
That was my question before.
I think the federal government says that they are.
Well, they aren't in other places. I mean, they may be here,
It's intermittent stream.
well, there's a perennial, intermittent, and ephemeral. And a perennial would be something that's constantly flowing. Intermittent would be.
Something that has water in it, we have to rain real hard.
Yeah, I think so. Yes.
I think what Christopher said was that because of the topography of our area, all those kind of streams hook to the waters of the United States, because we are basically we are islands surrounded by, waterways that all flow into the ocean.
Well, they might change it. They went back to buffer.
And And he's sure of that.
So he is, are you?
We're gonna phone a friend. Would you like to?
Yeah, I can, I mean, I think it would probably be, you want me to get, okay, yeah, all right. If it's a ephemeral stream,
I'm not worried about
or
ephemeral.
intermittent, I'm guessing a non-tidal, would probably be considered a freshwater wetland. Or, yeah, or some kind of like a ditch, stormwater, but. Yeah, if it's tidal, then, you know, it's part of the CRM
Yeah, so
jurisdiction.
that's what I guess I'm wondering is, cause not all, I wouldn't even assume that all intermittent streams are tidal around here. And so that's why I'm just wondering, do we wanna regulate the standards, intermittent streams? You know, do we wanna regulate, just call them freshwater streams? We don't wanna even get into it.
I don't think we want to use freshwater because it's probably not accurate.
The county's using the term non-tidal.
Okay, well, then we use non-tidal, but you know,
Tidal
but
and
freshwater,
non-tidal.
so non-tidal streams, do we want those to be regulated as well? I mean, most protected waterway regulations, all those that I've dealt with, have dealt with. You know. Streams, perennial streams, intermittent streams, particularly as regulated water bodies, same way that wetlands are.
But I think that.
They call them out differently, but they have setbacks from them.
But I'm assuming this is Kentucky.
Yeah, but I'm asking, but the same thing here, if we're trying to protect water bodies, waterways
I'm just wondering
from
if there are any
degradation.
that fall into that category.
Well, I think
Yeah,
there
or I
are.
would say.
I mean, and
we've
maybe there
got
could
two
be a
categories,
stream
right?
thread.
If it's not tidal, then it's all other, and I
Yeah.
think we got it. I mean, this is already going, you know, making a lot of progress here by adding the non-tidal wetlands to the code. So I think basically we're covered because the county's got everything mapped. So if you're coming in for development, the staff looks at the website and says if you got a wetland there and they say, oh, okay, and you know it's not tidal, then you've got to go out and get.
Well, that's what I'm
wetland
just saying
survey,
is,
and then.
that's what I'm
from
just
there. So-
asking is, that's what I'm trying to determine is, are we including non-tidal creeks within the wetlands regulation? Then I think we just need to make sure that we define it that way, because a wetlands normally isn't, the definition of a wetland isn't necessarily the same as a non-tidal creek. I don't think they are. Wetlands, the basis of a wetlands definition, usually, you're looking at the soil types
So
predominantly.
you're putting an awful lot of stuff in here that I don't
I'm
know.
just
that we
putting
want.
it in for now, so we can
Okay.
talk about it. Don't want it. So basically, yeah.
So
I guess the question is on the wetland buffers and standards,
I think 8.1 needs to be purpose. It needs to match the ones we have for critical area buffers.
I'm just,
Yeah, that's what it's called.
we don't have the
8.2.
county regulation in front of us.
And then 8.2.2 is gonna be applicability and size.
But I'm gathering that the
And then
county
we want-
regulates non-tidal
It needs
creeks.
to match
Which this
this.
is wetland,
Huh?
that's wetlands.
It says wetlands, but how does it define wetlands then?
I think the, Corps of Engineers, I just call it the Corps of Engineers, standards. Tidal.
Well, that's changing.
Well, what is the definition on the map? That's from the GIS.
Okay.
The map that you made purple with the purple and the pink.
It's just buffers, it just shows buffers.
But where is the information as to what are wetlands coming from? For the purposes of that.
From the county's wetlands layer and wherever they got it from. Our JS system is basically a county system, we share that information.
So we can refer to the county map system.
JS maps.
Yeah.
So I think we're referring to the county GIS map system, would the people need to still get a wetland survey?
Oh, yeah, that's what.
Well, let's getting into the code here,
Development removal
which we thought was too restrictive, because it was like anytime you did anything.
Well, even if it's not
Yeah, you-
showing on the GIS map, like they say the plat, there's no wetland on the plat, do they still have to get?
Well, let's go down to that section, because Bluffton's was really far reaching, and I think you all didn't like that.
We
last
didn't
meeting.
like that, that's
You
why
did
I
not
tried
like
to.
And so let's go to that, Christopher, because it was, I think we deleted it, but basically requires you to do like an affidavit or something on every, even if you were gonna build like a shed and you didn't think you were in a wetland, you had to do it. There we go.
Where's it at?
Wetland delineation survey, yeah.
So,
Like,
so why can't we just rely on the county map showing
prepared by,
wetlands? Why do we have to have all this stuff?
I mean, you could say I should say, is required by staff. I mean, we're talking about what largers, when the subdivisions come in and you get a piece of property and sometimes they'll show the wetlands on it, even the, the non-title wetlands. Or if when you're doing your background pre-app, and you say, hey, county thing shows wetlands, we need to survey.
And that's where it gets.
Particular site, you have to have a higher degree of delineation.
Yeah.
You can't just use the GIS.
They could be referred
To show to alert staff to the need for additional information. The first resort could be the county map. And if your lot doesn't have anything, looks like a wetland on the county maps, then you don't have this problem. But if you do have this problem, then you can ask for all this extra stuff. And where that needs to
You
go
want to
is
go with what they
is
have?
the applicability.
Who's revise it based on the Bluffton standard and just revise it based on, because we already have like,
Do I have it locked in front of me?
we have a foundation here.
It's like what we're not doing, Kirk, because you're jumping ahead, is we're not filling out the critical parts of the purpose and application and the size. So if we've been talking about that, we can fill that in now.
You pull it in now or do this now?
Where does this go in? Which subsection there? The wetlands are-
It's not going anywhere right now.
But we have, yes. we can
Okay,
put the
so-
end. We have. So the purpose, what is that?
The purpose is to protect wetlands that are not otherwise protected by the critical
Single family.
area
Other accessory
buffer.
uses, that's less than 5 acres, so it's pretty much saying anything over 5 acres is a wetland survey.
of the wetlands buffer. It's to protect wetlands. Shown on the Beaufort County map, probably a better word for that.
Protect wetlands. I don't think you want to reference it here.
But we want to add some additional language after the map. That are not otherwise protected by critical area buffers.
From what I'm hearing, it may not show up on the GIS wetlands on the county, right?
It does,
All of them do, okay. Gotcha.
critical area buffers. And when you get down to the applicability and size, that's where we
Put in the
we
second.
put the same kind of language as in 8.2.2, except omit the first line.
I would put this. 1, 2.
I wouldn't just make it simple.
this section shall apply to all building development, redevelopment, site alteration, footprint or what buffer area.
And then submit a stormwater permit application for the code administrator. I think that applicability of size needs to be simple, and then all this other extra stuff comes later in a subsequent section. Make it look like the critical area buffer section.
With the buffers, right? With the,
Yeah, except obviously we're gonna have to take out that critical area buffer. Yeah. So a wetlands buffer be established. On all property located adjacent to wetlands shown on the county map.
Are we gonna say non-title? Yes.
Well, we used to, we can look at 8.3.1. We're trying to protect any wetlands that are not protected by critical area buffers. So these are all the rest.
Yeah. Gotcha.
And then it's adding non-title, it's another term in there.
This isn't hurt.
So all property located to adjacent to a wetland, take out non-title there. County map. And if you want to have non-title, then they say included without limitation, non-title. So
Well, go ahead now, I get the question.
Sometimes a critical area, a critical line, whenever we do our projects, sometimes a critical line is beyond the edge of where the marsh is. So there's a critical line and there's more marsh, wetland. And then you have a
But that would still be in the, if it's on the non-ocean side of the critical line, it's protected by a critical area buffer. So we don't need to have a wetlands buffer too.
Right.
A wetlands buffer is
make
for
sure.
things that aren't protected by the critical area buffer.
Now, all I was also just adding to the wetlands thing is just because I assume there are non-tidal creeks in the areas, whether we want to include in the wetlands buffers, non-tidal creeks of a certain kind.
Edge of the wetland as shown on the county map.
There any non-tidal creeks at all? Including the areas that'll be
That's what
added?
Chris did.
I don't know, but you have more experience with different county, I really don't.
I would agree with that. That's pretty much all title
Yeah.
creeks.
Okay.
That's why it was so special and important.
As long as it's, I mean, we often talk about.
Yeah, whatever, use the same term you use, you're gonna end up using it.
We often talk about non-brackish waters, which, you know,
And then just take out all.
strikes me that then you're getting into non-tidal creeks when the water gets. It's no longer any
Even
brackish.
even our freshwater rivers are tidal here, like
Okay,
once you get up to. Like the Pocatello is a freshwater river, but it's still tidally influenced by the push
Yeah,
from
that's right,
the
right.
sound.
but we're assuming that that all of those creeks have a critical line on them from which there's gonna be a buffer. Is that true?
I mean, it's amazing. It's hard what we've got. It all, I mean, yes. There's no way this development.
And then take out conventional districts.
Because it really depends whether or not the VCM is regulating those that are establishing a critical line along those. I just don't know.
Yeah, I think it does go.
Because if it isn't, because if there's a tidal creek and it doesn't have an established critical line, then we're not. We're assuming that you can go right up to the edge.
Same changes we just.
Well,
Really don't know.
Too.
And I don't know, and I'm really saying is that, because I don't think that's what we can.
if there's a doubt on if it's titled, you can ask the surveyors to go out, because sometimes like on Trip Island, they have some of these canals back in there. And it's like, okay, are they fresh or are they salt? I mean, yeah, fresh or salt. So you'll have a surveyor go out and verify.
Anyway.
You know, which way it goes.
Yeah, but all I'm saying is because a wetland is a different ecosystem than a creek. It is if we're dealing, if there are non-tidal creeks out there. Our regulation, if we just refer to tidal creeks, you know, and wetlands, we're leaving off non-tidal creeks, and that's what I'm really throwing out there. Do you really wanna leave them exempt from all regulation? They still could be an important water body. Yeah. But if.
Yeah.
There is
Yeah,
no
I feel
such
like
thing.
they got it covered.
Yeah. I
So
mean,
you don't think that's really what I'm just trying to get, there is no, understand what I'm saying is, because we deal with a critical line that's established for all. I mean, we have two different lines that we're concerned about, where is the wetland, and we're gonna have a buffer on that, and we're gonna have the critical line that's established by BCM. And all I'm saying is if there are some non-tidal creeks that don't have a critical line established by BCM, then there's no setback from them.
Right, but that's what the all other is about.
Well, and is that, where's the all other, what are you calling it? Because
Move
that,
it up a little bit, Christopher, no, the other way. Wetland buffers and standards. Purpose of the wetland buffers to protect wetlands shown on the Beaufort County wetlands map that are not otherwise protected by critical areas.
but I'm saying a wetland and a creek are not the same thing, they're different ecosystems. And so by calling in a wetland, you're only regulating a
What does the
wetland.
map show about creeks? I mean, is there
We can find that out by our next meeting,
There
of
are
course, on
there-
freshwater creeks. I don't think they're
But
right, but that would be easy to verify.
But that means that every tidal creek has a critical line established by BCM, and I don't know that that's
okay, well,
true.
how about if we
You see what I'm
compromise?
saying is it's not an issue, I'm just trying to get it. If you're talking about, if every creek is a tidal creek, but not every creek has a critical line. Okay, because that I just don't know. We would not be regulating, we would have to have a regulatory setback from that non-tidal creek if it doesn't have a critical line, because we don't establish it, because it's not a wetland. So what we need to determine whether every creek in the city has a critical line established by BCM. If it doesn't, then we want to make sure that we have it regulated under, added to the wetlands provisions by talking about other non-critical line creeks, or however we want to terminate.
Okay,
just
well,
to define it.
so that's where I was trying to suggest
Yeah.
a compromise here that would be inclusive of that. And if we go to 8.3.2A, wetlands buffer shall be established on all property located to a wetland as shown on the county's wetlands map, including without limitation, non-tidal creek.
Yeah, that, if that could work.
Shows up.
Yeah.
That could work then. And now, when we send this thing out for public review, hopefully, somebody, Coastal League or something will take a look at that more closely and tell us if we got this covered correctly or if we're off base. Yeah.
So do we need to put, is a pond shown on the county map as a wetland?
I think a wetland is a wetland, and a pond is a pond.
I think that's right.
Do we want to protect ponds?
Well, I think that's why you have that wetlands delineation. It goes out.
No, but that isn't, the question is, do we want to protect all water bodies? Or are we only trying to limit it to, these tidal creeks and wetlands? Or we also say if there's for example, the lake that was built across the way there, the hole that was dug, what do they call the thing over there on Lake?
Oh,
Crystal Lake.
Oh, Crystal.
Crystal Lake is that's just, that's a natural lake, isn't it? It's a burrow pit.
No, I don't think it's natural.
Well, I mean, it's not, it's not, it's a non-tidal, it's not fed by a tidal creek.
I think,
That much stormwater, isn't it?
well, I think it was dug out. It was made deeper. It was a wetland and then they dug it out for.
But it's a nice little lake now. I mean, however a lake was created, are we interested in protecting other water bodies like lake?
Well, I think maybe not, because
Okay.
I think what underlies a lot of this is that wetlands perform an important function. I don't know that a pond performs any function other than skiing, fishing, swimming.
That's not important. How about,
I don't know, I think they probably.
oh, and other
I don't,
waters
in their
are
inherent
less
nature, I don't know
affected
that
by the administrator.
ponds actually filter.
I think natural.
They're not wetlands, you're right.
A pond is a pond, a wetland is a wetland. A pond is a hole in the ground with water in it.
Yeah, but you wanna protect them too, if they grow, if fish are growing in it.
I guess,
Throw it out
I
there.
mean,
Except.
like if somebody digs a pond for stormwater, are we gonna require them to?
No.
No, we're not, I think we've completely accepted stormwater detention basins.
People think fish ponds, they got like, those around.
We don't have any ponds and.
Mean anything, if we literally
If
don't.
we had lakes, it'd be a different story.
Pardon?
Can you read these changes here in
I
A?
think we got it covered.
Okay. I'm just throwing it out. to see what it works. What I'm looking here. Tidal creeks and other waters.
Well, you're a koi pond now, decide to.
No, not even, and they should be over a minimum size anyway, even. We want to have minimum sizes on the wetlands as well.
These ponds can be natural or artificial, while wetlands are typically natural ecosystems. Wetlands are critical for water management and biodiversity, acting as natural filters and habitats, whereas ponds are primarily water storage features.
And we go.
And other waters unless accepted by the code. I don't know about that either.
Exempted.
Oh, let's come up with something.
Exempted, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
That including organification.
In short, while some ponds may be classified as wetlands, not all ponds are wetlands. Wetlands are a broader category of ecosystems with specific characteristics related to water saturation and vegetation, while ponds are simply bodies of standing water, often smaller and shallower.
No, I understand that, but I don't diminish the value of ponds and natural lakes, but on the non-tidal creeks, we at least want to say non-tidal perennial, I don't know if we want to. And I don't know if I use streams or non-perennial. Non-tidal streams, how about that? Non-tidal perennial streams. I don't know if we want to. Wish we had some better expertise here.
Waterways.
I mean, streams are defined as perennial, I know that's perennial, intermittent and ephemeral, and I know we don't want to regulate ephemeral
Well, I think
and maybe not even
somebody suggested
intermittent.
waterways, maybe, but waterways and non-tidal, waterways and bodies of water.
Well, now, then you are regulating these ponds, which nobody seems to care about.
Unless
Except
it can be accepted.
I care about it.
Are we happy with this?
So how does the code administrator exempt these things?
That can be a subsequent section.
But proclamation, I hereby accept.
He just waves his magic wand.
That's a rain garden, not a water garden.
I think we're.
We, down in the subsequent part, we can talk about standards for exemptions.
If necessary, I mean, we've already made a lot of progress, so I think good to go.
Excessive,
Yeah.
of course.
All the wordsmith, are we gonna do all the wordsmithing right here or?
That's where we do usually.
Oh, wow,
Okay, otherwise we won't see this for 2 weeks
Yeah.
and we won't remember anything. That's the whole idea.
We were doing it the other way, but actually it's been working out better.
Okay.
Okay, we tried multiple ways.
Yeah.
Not that we can't further wordsmith, but.
Right, I just thought sometimes.
The end of the words.
Okay, so.
I think that's good. Now, all this other stuff. Left in.
So we're gonna talk about having an exemption standard, is that right?
Yes.
And so that we might. You know, exempt things based on the size of the water body, the size of the wetland, the nature of the foliage, and so forth.
So code administrator may exempt
Well, you see where it's at.
a property.
How about instead of saying that we just say certain. The following, what do we call them, water bodies, the following wetlands and water bodies are exempted from this regulation, and then we list them based on their size.
This sets the standard. The code administrator may exempt a property from application of wetlands buffer.
I just say that. I would say that a certain kind of water bodies are exempt instead of the code administrator may exempt.
Based on the following.
I think we can take the code administrator.
And then just put one, I know you don't want the code administrator to do anything.
No, I don't, I'm all for it, I just say we do, the following water bodies are exempt from this regulation, and then we say wetlands less than, you know. Whatever size, 0.5 acres or 0.1 acre.
But if you do it this way.
Yeah.
The applicant has to ask for an exemption. And that having the standard applicable unless somebody asks and gets an exemption is a pro-wetland protective.
Paul, what do you have?
Well, I just wanted to simply say, you've already mentioned stormwater ponds, and that's an important exemption. The other thing, I wanted to mention, I think is you should create an exemption based on a collective planning commission judgment. Also depending on elevation, bear in mind, remember I mentioned a commercial property. This new restaurant out here, for example, has a big tall bluff where it may be desirable to have an encroachment within the 50 feet for a deck or some amenity of that nature. So I'm just saying that you need to create some ability to judge a particular property on its merits based on an application. They can come in and try to describe that situation where it would be beneficial to have in the planning commission, probably more so than the administrator, needs to have the ability to to provide for a special exception or something along those lines.
Well, we should have, if you don't want the code administrator to do the exempting, we can put the planning commission, but it should also.
Can we also give some criteria that
That's what I'm trying to
people
do.
have to, in other words, you just can't come in and ask for it, you gotta set up some criteria that people need to demonstrate in order to get the.
Well, I'm trying to get to that here.
I don't know that the planning commission, because is that a power you have? So you'd have to do a major development for it to trigger, you know.
Based on the following,
So that makes sense, that's why you go.
findings.
So. Not saying I'm against giving you power, but.
Well, I guess, yes, but no, this would only apply
Yeah.
to the things that this.
I think that's what
So,
the fault,
I
I
think-
think the bills,
I-
the bills just saying, here's what you do.
What I'm
Minor
saying,
considerations.
I don't think that here, before you keep going in this direction, I think there are certain kinds of, go back to where we defined what we're regulating. There was another. So what we said is, adjacent to, where is that terminology? Moving around so fast. Okay. Including without limitation, non-tidal waterways and bodies of water. And what I'm saying is, I would immediately exempt all ephemeral and maybe intermittent, I'm just saying maybe because it's up to discussion, waterways. And then bodies of water, I would just base it on maybe smaller than an acre. You know, some of them are just gonna be plain exempt because we don't even, you know, we don't necessarily care about them. I mean, they're so small, or it shouldn't be a determination about whether, you know, we're even thinking about regulating an ephemeral creek.
Okay, so maybe,
So you can have two different kinds. You can have some that are automatically exempted. And then others that maybe apply for an exemption.
okay, we can do that, but let's talk about a list of exemptions, and then we can figure that
Well,
out. That's what I'm trying to get to down in 8.3.
I know, but I wasn't saying that you come to an administrator to exempt an ephemeral stream, they ought to just be exempt by virtue
Well,
of the
we
fact
can do
that
that.
they're ephemeral.
We can do
But,
that.
yeah, I just think the way you had written it, you said the administrator may exempt it, I'm just saying that exemptions would be a list.
That's why I think we should have just left it without the non-tidal waterways and bodies of water. Because that covers all of them, and then when we do the exemptions, 8.3.4, which we're trying to get to, then we can make your list.
That's what I'm trying to do, but not leaving it up to the code administrator in all cases.
Well, okay. We can, okay.
Exempted by the code administrator.
No, leave that for a minute. Let's talk about the exemptions. Okay.
So you can say the following water.
So A should be,
Well, I have to pull up a planning commission, packet here, and it looks like a quarter of an acre, a half an acre. I've done various things.
Yeah.
0.3.
And, you know, they're
Following.
recommending wetland buffers based on a lot of other things, but it'll be too complicated. So we don't get it. But, yeah, they're showing some examples of,
Use of water are exempt.
Are you talking to someone?
I'm talking, yeah, I was saying, you were talking about the size, and I just pulled something up and from the APA, from the American Planning, I pulled up a presentation, and it's,
Small ponds.
there's approaches where you take a specific wetland type. And it's basically anything over a half an acre or a quarter of an acre.
Yeah, that's what I'm, sort of what I'm getting
I'm
at.
going to exempt. There's some that are exempt,
So you do the buffer.
and then the code administrator can exempt some of the ones
So I'm
based
just,
on
I'm just
finding.
finding what you're saying.
So a wetland less than a half acre.
That's how.
I'd go to it.
Less than an acre?
Yeah.
Okay, that's fine with me.
So would that cover some of those wetlands that are shown on the county map?
No, it wouldn't.
No, I think some of them we want to protect, are gonna be less than an acre.
We're making less than a half acre.
Let's say half acre. We're down to a quarter acre, so that's what I was saying, some, I was just pulling up an APA presentation where it had listed some communities that had done this, and they listed, you know, half acre, acre, and quarter of an acre would be examples.
Wouldn't do any smaller than a half an acre.
So you make her.
We're half acre.
Right.
So
Stormwater facilities.
Or retention ponds.
Um,
On swale.
ditches. Okay, C, what else would be automatic?
I would-
consent?
wait, go down a little bit, because you got a lot of the same terminology here. So you had small ponds. So, first of all, I wouldn't say the code administrator, I would just say the following,
Yeah.
I gotta use the right term, water bodies, is that what we used? Are exempt from this regulation, or
For this section,
And waterways.
this requirement.
Requirements, from these requirements, so.
From buffer,
These buffer requirements. We can play with it.
these
There's a lot of
regulatory
ways-
requirements.
There's a lot of ways you could say it, yeah.
And then,
I think we still wanna give the code administrator a, the ability to grant exemption.
well, you can
to-
have that as a separate
Yes,
section,
move
that,
that language down.
Just add that.
No.
Oh, wait.
It's gonna be section, this is gonna be,
and then I would
this
just,
is A. The following, that's A. That's one.
then I would, instead of saying small, I would just say ponds and wetlands less than a half acre, is that what everybody agreed, that less than a half acre?
Yeah.
Yeah.
How about anybody? How about drainage ditches?
Well, then we're gonna have, then there's a separate one that's gonna just say,
Small pond.
stormwater retention facilities, and then get rid of ponds there, because we just had it. Swales, ditches, whatever else you wanna get rid of.
Well, except-
I wouldn't even have an EG, I would just say retention ponds, swales, ditches.
Well, and the ditch is the same thing.
I guess they are they? They're not.
That's why I had stormwater retention facilities.
Yeah.
Dancing on the head of a pin here.
Just don't give any et cetera, say swales, ditches, is there something else somebody wanted?
Rain garden.
Rain gardens, absolutely.
Let's just have AI records.
Huh?
We should just give it a few prompts and see what comes out.
That would certainly save time.
Save time.
A1. Small body.
Sure, it'd be any worse.
No, just say ponds and any, just say ponds and wetlands less than a half acre in size. Swimming pools.
Now we got a project.
Okay,
We just go back once, I wanna just see if the terminology was what we used, let's go back and just do.
we need to have something where it's
Hold on a second.
practically impossible to.
Purpose of wetlands,
Do the
wetlands.
Because of the regulations a lot.
On a touch screen.
I know, I was just trying to, you're right. Continuing that.
Oh, it is. He's screen sharing, so he wouldn't be on the screen.
Bodies will-
How do we address Paul's comment about the elevation and the distance and getting inside the buffer?
That's why we need to have.
Then we'll have another exemption, well, then we'll have another
That's
exemption
where
where
the
you,
code administrator should get involved.
right,
So B needs to be the code administrator can grant exception on the following, based on the following findings.
friends and relatives, friends of the code administrator. Is that the way it works?
I'll go into sensations anytime. What?
Do we copy and paste 8.2.3 into the wetlands, which is the
So,
decks and.
unique characteristics of the lot.
Just use the variance standards. Yeah. Bring those up. A few of them. Which one? Some of the variance standards that are pretty good. Like she said.
Oh, do you have them handy? Can.
Let me print. Normal. You're lying.
Under 914.
Half of a variance. Sorry.
Yeah, I kind of agree. Yeah, I'm still doing.
Is this a criteria?
All right. There are extraordinary exceptional conditions relating to the particular class of property.
Section are you looking
For
at?
example, the variance is justified because of topographic or special, section 9.4.1, 2. And that's half.
9.2.1, is that what you said?
Yeah, these conditions mentioned which were.
You're at
8.2.1.
9.2.1.
9.14.3.
Page 2.
But 9.14?
Yeah, questioning if we should apply that to the wetlands. That's a slide. Yeah, 80 square feet and 400 square feet.
That's where you were, okay.
You should join.
Grinding of gears, miles per hour.
Copy that. And then we can take a look at it. Copy down to. Next section two.
Helps learn how to manage.
That'll be.
I think there's a few.
We don't need that.
Apply. We could just.
Just build it there.
Page 2, 8.2.3. Page 2. Yeah. Yes.
This is right.
So we can say. Yeah, that's, that'll be one.
Oh, yeah, I see what you're saying.
But I had to change, for some reason I had to change to 800. Didn't I put 800 square feet? I changed. You did.
Alright, so the 80 was just for residential and the 400 was for.
Okay.
Yeah.
Now, do we want to have that second one, that conditions from that general apply to other property in the vicinity?
Probably not.
Let's take that out. that cover all your concerns, do you think?
Well, I was gonna say that under 8.2.3 D, where it lists, says that lots in the trade sector district with bulkheads, it just has to do with the elevation gain. You know, if you have a big tall bluff, there ought to be the ability to permit something. I mean, it's still a distance from the critical line, it's just vertical instead of horizontal. And I'm just saying that some reasonable, it encourages creativity.
Well,
That's all.
typically the zoning board of adjustment deals with setback variances. And I don't know that we need to have all of this because they can always apply to ZBOA for a setback variance. And there's a whole set of standards that apply to how they're granting of dimensional variances, and I think we just rely on that. Other than the things that we just exempt, I think we rely on. I mean, I'm not a big fan of ZBOAs generally, but they are under every state code, and we got one here in South Carolina that grants us really pretty broad powers, broader than most places, but clearly they always have jurisdiction over dimensional variances. So I would just rely on them for that. Take all the rest of that out about the code administrator grading other exceptions. What do you think, Kurt? And then usually where you would send somebody if they say, I don't think the 50-foot should apply to me.
Yeah.
Okay,
This is ZBA.
yeah.
They need more work.
I even need
They need more work.
I don't think you even need to.
Don't
put it
need to
as
sign it.
ZBA, isn't that-
No, you don't even have to, just, I mean,
It's just infer it, isn't it?
Get it all
is.
out.
They got everything on.
Yeah,
But so adding to the exemptions, I would add ephemeral streams, and I might even add intermittent, and I only say that because I think that's something that you have to decide.
You mean underwater, like how, or just as?
No, I mean, said the following bodies of water exempt from these. And we call them wetlands buffer, but you know, I don't, should say that's really the right terminology. I'd just say buffer requirements. We kind of put it all under wetlands, but we're really talking about protected waterways.
please don't take that out. I mean,
Well, but-
we agreed to have
Go back
two
and
types of buffers.
go back and look
Critical
at it.
area buffers and wetlands buffers. And the more terms we add, the more confusing it gets.
Wetland is an actual term of art. We can wait till you go back, people will know.
And that would cover, I think, if they went for a variance from the CBOA, right?
I mean, I'm just, for my purpose, I'm just saying, I would still probably call it as other protected, protected waterway buffers or protected water buffers. That are, and then, under the protected waters are wetlands and other waterways. But the only reason I'm saying that is because these other things that we put under the wetlands category are not wetlands. Wetland is a distinct ecosystem from a non-tidal waterway.
Except that the
Yeah,
wetlands
body of-
are shown on the county map.
Oh, yeah. But I mean, you could write that different. I mean, you could, instead of saying a wetlands buffer, you can say a protected waters buffer shall be established on all properties located adjacent to a wetland as shown on the county's map, as well as, you know, non-tidal waterways and other bodies of water. You could do it that way.
Well, if everybody agrees, we can take out the term wetlands buffer wherever it appears and call it a protected waters buffer.
That's all I'm saying is somebody would probably end up saying is these other things that we define in this are not technically wetlands. And so I think it's fair to put it all under the same buffer standards. I'm just saying but to call all these other things wetlands, you know, when they're not wetlands.
Does everybody agree to change wetlands buffer to protected waters buffer wherever it appears? Well, except if we're referring to no, that's okay. Areas.
You could say to protect waters shown on the Beaufort County wetlands map. Is that what it's called, a wetlands map, Chris? Yeah.
Well, it's just it's a GIS layer.
It's just a layer.
It's just a layer, it's just
There is-
GIS
you got
map.
data, right? Yeah.
But it's the layer is called wetlands.
That's what it is.
Wow.
I don't know what the county calls it, it's basically, it shows all critical, like marshlands, tidal.
So somebody who's reading this code, you just drop down into Beaufort County from outer space. Where would they go to find the Beaufort
What we
County
need to do
wetlands?
is assign Christopher the task of
These could go
finding out
100
exactly
Regal Road.
what it is called.
Well, that's what I just wondering, how would you know?
That's, we need to get the right term.
So we need to figure out what to call that.
Yes, and so right now this is a placeholder until we
Placeholder.
figure out what to call.
I'm happy with that.
Okay.
We're gonna put it in the parking lot.
Highlight that, so you remember, we gotta find out exactly what it's called. Beaufort County Wetlands Map is what should be highlighted.
But are we also saying that if they're not shown on that map, whatever it is, we're not protecting it?
Yes. That's our line in the sand. Our reference point.
So we're assuming that map has done a good job of delineating all the important water bodies. So
But I thought we added the non-tidal waterways and bodies of water.
When we add this stuff, we need to be able to define it, because I'm just sitting here, as you read this proposed code.
At the end.
Somebody who's reading this, who's never stepped foot in Beaufort before, but wants to build something in Beaufort, they need to figure out where it is and how to define it, or else we're not helping.
right,
Put it up there.
Not they're gonna do, that's why they highlight it.
Yeah, so we gotta figure out what to call that.
right.
Highlight that thing again. Placeholder.
Are they protected waters, or isn't that the whole point of this? That we're creating protected waters? So shouldn't we,
I think,
everyone
so-
see them as wetlands?
Well, no,
That's
so-
what they're basically saying or not.
I would use a different word. What we're struggling with right now, at least in part, I think, is identifying.
Yeah, what is the word? Is it just, couldn't it just go back to wetlands because everybody knows where wetlands?
Bill's the one that wanted.
All I said is that there's, the way we've written it now is there are certain things that we're looking to regulate with setbacks that are not technically wetlands. So I wouldn't call something that isn't a wetland a wetland.
Well, what would that be?
Well, any kind of
We don't
stream,
have anyone.
any kind of stream is no wetland.
So can we just define that? We're already defining that here, so wouldn't that just add confusion?
What's adding confusion? I don't know.
You're defining it in the exemption that it's not protected. I'm just saying protected waters.
Then we're exempting certain things, we're exempting ponds and wetlands less than a certain size. Mike says an acre, I kind of agree with him on an acre, but right now it says less than a half acre. Then we're exempting some other things from that protected water.
Back up a little bit on that purpose paragraph, so I don't know if that
When you
makes
use
sense.
this term protected waters, but it's not like a term like wetlands that everybody at least has some idea what it is.
Yeah, exactly.
Do we need to define?
I think you have to.
I think it's,
Because like I said, imagine you just drop down from outer space and you reading this code for the first time. And you see the term protected.
so it says to protect waters, including without limitation, non-tidal waterways. Did you take wetlands out of there?
Why did I suggest?
I didn't say anything. You missed the point.
We're getting at- I don't know
It's one of the protected. The purpose of the protected waters buffer is to protect wetlands and then define the other waters. To protect waters, including without limitation, wetlands, non-tidal waterways. That's what, you have to have wetlands as one of those that we're protecting, but it's not the same thing as a non-tidal waterway.
What isn't a generic term, wetlands, if I'm the alien?
I don't think it's.
I have no idea what, I would just protected water seems like federal to me, you know, like, why are we getting that? It just doesn't seem like. Makes a lot of, you know, you're defining it in here. Framing it wide.
Let me go back to what we said. We obviously were interested in waters that the BCM showed a critical line on. When I asked the question, were all streams and creeks and rivers, did all of them have a critical line established by BCM? And the answer was, we don't know. So then we added
The
it.
answer was,
Most of them, yes, they
You said most of them, but
they do, yeah.
This is a very hard-working bunch.
this is the hard working bunch, but we
Goes to
didn't.
Highway 17, that's the cutoff, freshwater and saltwater. So I'm nearly positive all the way up to 17 would have that critical area line.
And that's the county line, basically.
yes.
Now, but as we grow, but we also were, one of the things we were assuming in all of these regulations is, let's assume that city limits may grow. So then the question is, you know, as the city limits
Not
grow.
beyond the Whale Branch,
Huh?
Well,
not
unless
beyond the
we,
Whale Branch.
unless we want to
Okay.
be Genesee,
No,
we're not
I
gonna be
just.
more than one county.
That's about this I was thinking about, we can't be more than one county.
No.
Well, yeah, what city can be?
You can, you
Yeah.
can in some states.
Absolutely. I guess you can.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Diane, do you have a suggestion?
No, but I have something else for you to think about.
I don't know if we wanna hear from you.
No, with this administration cutting back all kinds of regulations, keep in mind that protected waterways may not in the future mean federally protected. Federally protected may become less and less.
Will be.
So that's why we're writing our own
Right,
regulations.
so I
And
need
it-
to,
But these
yeah, be
critical area
sure.
lines are regulated by the state,
okay,
not the federal.
okay, I didn't know that, thank you.
So why are we not doing wetland buffers? Because everybody knows what that means. I think that's where I'm.
If you only wanna regulate wetlands, I just said, if you wanna regulate wetlands, just regulate wetlands, but you're not regulating, you know, ponds and creeks and so forth, that's all I'm saying.
But there are,
Just don't call something that isn't a wetland.
if we determine that we have no ponds and creeks. Are we just complicating all this?
Well, if we don't, that's why I asked the question, and earlier
I know,
on,
I
nobody said
know.
with any degree of assurance that there was a critical line setback from all creeks. Now, if we've established that.
Well, I think that's
Chris was-
something we'll have to research for the next meeting.
Yeah, why don't we
Let's just
research?
default back to the wetland.
Yeah, why, before we spend another 2 hours debating this, why don't we get the answer to the question that might settle it for us? How about that?
I like
That's a good idea. So you can leave it in and highlight it all as red, I mean, yellow, and take it out.
Not all, it's just the description protected
Yeah.
waters.
Yeah.
That's, I'm
You
gonna
can just
highlight
put,
that.
and you can put a
and-
little parentheses at the end, wetlands buffers.
I thought all we were gonna do today was decide whether it was 30 or 50 foot setback.
Yeah.
Well, we did that.
That was the easy part. That was the first one right out of the box.
So we've got the framework for the exceptions. So the next, let's see those funeral streams. What do you want out of the Bluffton thing? What do you think is absolutely necessary out of?
Well, they got a lot of good,
It's like-
they got a lot of
They
stuff.
got a lot of stuff, but how much of it do we really need?
Do you like the section shall apply to all building development, redevelopment, et cetera, what's the buffer? We can just go through it all, see what you want to keep.
Is this in our draft that we've got right now?
Yeah.
No,
Well,
it
well, I
was
think
in
it
the
was
previous
X
strike through draft.
It was
We-
the
He took
red
it,
line,
put it back.
the red line first under 8.3.4. Wetland standards. Page 6.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's in his main version.
Oh, there's
there's
the red line
Yeah.
version.
Is it in the? clean?
Page 4, yeah.
Okay.
It's in the clean version.
Yeah, because I did ask about a stormwater permit and I don't know. So it-
Or of 8.
So this.
Oh, I suggest.
Oh, it starts down at the bottom,
Right.
8.3.3. So this was stuff that we already talked about, right?
But the clean version doesn't have things that we strike out, like a lot of,
Okay.
we strike out a lot. But
Well, so question number one, do we like what we have in the clean version, and do we need to add any more of this stuff that we already struck out? That would be simple.
I need to read that, because I missed the last. Chance to study that.
It's pretty clear. Technical requirements that a delineation survey, that are violation. Page.
So we still have this. We should take this out.
But we already went through it all.
That's all right.
You like that, page 48 on there?
What does a stormwater permit application mean? I mean, what? I guess, is that part of a new stormwater proposal?
So this,
Where are you?
okay, this
at
is
the
where
top of page 4, A1. I guess if you just scroll up on that, you'll see it.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, you see some,
Oh,
right there, so, and I'm guessing if you have now a new permit, you gotta amend.
Well, do we have it? Do we have a stormwater permit? Is that something that you guys do? Right now,
well, that's just how much that you took over.
that came from law, right? So the question is, do you have that?
No.
Well, then we don't want to have it in here.
No, we don't.
Why don't we just get rid of it?
yes.
But do you
Wait,
think,
How about
wait,
just
wait.
submit a permit application?
but do you think if you adopt, the city adopts the Bluffton Soloco, you're going to have one? Cause that's, look at the size of that.
I would imagine that.
You see what I mean? I don't know,
Yeah,
I'm
it's
just
gonna
saying, I don't.
require a permit.
Well, are we gonna issue a permit or is it just gonna be a review?
That's a good question.
Are we now in the stormwater section?
No, she. Part of the.
It's under, look at it, clean.
Part of the time share with you. There you go, this is the clean library version.
I'm looking at the clean version.
Yeah, well, yeah, the bottom of page 3 starts wetlands. I think we decided that's good. But then at the top of page 4 is A, general requirements.
And that is in the stormwater section. All of that's in
Yeah,
stormwater.
the
Right.
stormwater section is kind of.
But
very
it says it,
similar to
I
ours.
mean, 8.3, anyway, it says wetlands. I don't know, see, that's what.
That's part of the confusion.
Well, but that,
And so it may need to be moved up into
which
the
we did,
wetlands.
we moved it now, it's now under. 8.3, we kind of retitled it 8.3, protected for
Okay, so-
wetlands, buffers and standards.
So
Then
what
the
do-
new 8.4 is gonna be the stormwater.
Correct.
Section, right, so that, we did that move, we took it out and put it now into a new 8.3. Wetlands or protected waters buffer section, and 8.4 is then gonna be a stormwater.
The one thing that I think that we struck out last time that I'm thinking maybe we should think about cleaning back was the prohibited activities within wetlands buffers on page 8 of the marked up. Or the dirty version. That has the dumping and filling and.
Yeah, because previously we didn't have any buffers, so
Right.
yeah, we should put all that kind of stuff back in there. Now, if we're gonna have buffers, we gotta have certain things that are prohibited.
But probably where it should be is under 8.3 as under 8 versus
Yeah.
8.4.
That's,
Okay.
that's fine. So you're talking about 3 prohibited activities within wetland
Right,
buffers,
yeah.
that language in here? Ability and.
No, make a new section. Make it 8.3.4. Oh, 8.3.5.
Does it also apply to the critical areas or no? The prohibited activity.
You can't serve anything in the critical area buffer, that's already been. Fairly brief in there, so.
Well, is that what we said?
Yeah. No,
There's
Can't
only
move
a few
it.
things that are permitted.
right, you can't move any
Pathways,
vegetation.
Shall be undisturbed, so we have the whole thing, okay.
That one's pretty.
As long as it's here.
All these sections say the code administrator shall have the authority, blah, blah, blah. I like that.
There goes 2.
Yeah.
So.
Building consultants.
Just take that over the top. 8.3.5, prohibited activities.
All right. I like that. Benji, does that accomplish your purpose?
Yeah, I think so.
And then do you want to keep the survey on the violation? You just want a copy of this,
The exemption for the wetland delineation survey.
other than taking out the stormwater permit. There's other 5 things worthwhile.
So this is the, this was, it was the survey that I would call it, we got ourselves all bogged down with, we got some sort of
Yeah,
whole thing that we didn't want to have any
You just
wetlands.
took a small portion of it. On the clean version.
What if we, instead of going through all that Bluffton stuff, what if we took the clean version 8.3.3 to the end of the section and then call it. Call it.
Other than removing the stormwater permit, I think that sounds good.
So
Let's see how it looks like.
the last time we said we would only. We would request what we wanted to be reprinted each time, so this time we're gonna ask for a clean version and a red line. Or is the red line gonna be too complicated?
Yeah, this one's got all this new language on it now. It's.
Yeah, the red, and just a point about the red line, some of these things are, you know, with the different colors and stuff like that, they're basically unreadable. Because you got blue ink in a blue box, you know, I mean, so I don't know if that could be attended to when you're making the red line.
Well, it just happened, I'm not a Microsoft Word programmer, but what that is because it's been touched a few times, and it's showing you a different. So it was touched the one time, and then it was touched again with different format, and it's showing it in different colors. Yeah, it is very. I just don't know how to fix that. If anybody has any ideas, feel free to.
Sure, the girl who made, whoever it was who made that map, they could probably figure it out.
Oh, I could figure it out.
Well, okay, so then we need, what do we need to do with stormwater? 8.4. Do you like it the way it is?
And B, it says, how do I block them, if this section applies to any disturbance within a wetland or wetland buffer? But maybe A already includes it, it's applicable to all development. And then B applies to any disturbance.
So I had a suggestion regarding language, but applicability A. Instead, I think what we should say is the city of Beaufort adopts standards set forth in the town of Bluffton stormwater design manual ended on March 11th, 2025. Period.
That's better proactive language.
Can you repeat that? Sorry.
Yes, A should read, the city of Beaufort adopts the standards set forth in the town of Bluffton stormwater design manual amended on March 11, 2025. Period.
Okay.
Yes.
For the exemption, I mean, do we know how this impacts, let's say, single family development on an existing lot of record? What now happens?
You have to look in the Bluffton contract to find out, I can't say that.
And it's only on mine.
You all printed
Yeah,
one
we
out.
printed it out.
Oh, you did? Oh, okay.
There we go. That's.
I didn't notice what these guys of all this were.
Yeah.
I'm just-
Yeah, feel free to read it.
Because that's
Good.
it's important.
Makes
I mean,
sense.
You know, if I'm gonna build on a lot in Spanish Point, what does this mean now? That,
We gotta get these two notebooks and figure it out.
Well, we've been kind of using it all this time, because the city adopted it and then changed this. Oh.
So it's already a.
It's already kind of.
So now you don't answer my question.
Unofficially
We were
adopted.
just updating it, but we didn't go to the Bluffton standard. That was before I thought, I don't know when it happened. But when all of the Soloco communities did that, they apparently all, that's what we found, kind of adopted it, but.
So I guess we should talk about the McCormick and Taylor report.
Well, they just tell us why the.
Or one is different.
One is different than the other, that's what they tell us.
The basics are that in Bluffton, ponds and stuff are not considered to be impervious cover. And in the county, they are.
And they're thinking of changing that apparently.
Well, they're
In the county.
engaging a third-party evaluation to take a look at it, so
Right.
I guess we can wait and see what they come up with, decide if that's something we adopt or not.
So do we want to, what do we want to consider impervious cover for council? Right now, what is it?
I was going for what it says. Whatever that is. I'd never
Not
heard of
impervious cover.
a retention pond being considered impervious. I mean,
Crazy.
That's not the definition of
I sort of get it, but
a retention fund.
I sort of get it because it's supposedly it's retention. It's not, the water isn't filtering into the ground.
I mean, if you'd like him to kind of attend to the next meeting, I mean, I can see what his availability is, our stormwater engineer, because he could maybe explain it all, but you know,
Makes
the
sense.
intent is Bill is stating, it's a lot more reasonable.
I think that McCormick and Taylor is gonna argue against considering retention ponds being impervious surfaces. And I would think that's probably where most of these engineering firms are gonna come from.
Do you have any thoughts on that, lady?
well, I would just, as I'd like to know, especially for small developers. Again, I don't, you know, somebody has a lot in Pigeon Point, Spanish Point, existing lot of record, I wanna build a single family house. What do I need to do in terms of stormwater?
Well,
And I
if it's
think-
5,000, if
Yeah,
it's less
it's the
than
compound.
5,000 square feet. Oh, yeah, I can
From
answer
the lady.
that. If it's less than 5,000 square feet of impacted area, right?
Mhm,
We don't have to follow those stormwater.
I see.
So, but that includes like your driveway. Most houses are less than 5,000.
It's like 5,000 square of impervious is like the trigger.
That's right, that's the trigger.
I think that's a question that always comes up in our firm too, is like
Yeah.
what counts as impervious? We usually just count the the roof area.
Yeah.
And maybe driveway.
The roof area is driveway, because we don't permit anything but the roof and driveway. So if you want to put it, as you well know, that you want to put out like pavers and, you know, create a patio, you're not getting a permit for that, so we don't really, we don't even know what you're doing.
So but like for commercial development, when you are permitting and looking at that, so a concrete or asphalt parking lot is impervious, a gravel one is not.
Could be.
Yeah.
Could.
Yeah.
Usually,
We usually count it as pervious.
Gravel.
The
But it depends
the county
on the
considers
size
crush and
of
run
the
impervious.
Right, crush and run would be.
substrate.
But yeah, it's 5,000 square feet
Mhm,
of disturbed areas.
mhm.
And that's for both this and the.
The county counts pools as impervious.
So should we put that 5,000 square foot threshold into this,
I would just give it in this manual.
does it make change?
Because every because you know, a resident's not gonna have to use the manual, it's developer would have to. Manual could change. It's a technical manual, not.
Except that it says this section
So-
applies to any disturbance within a wetland or wetland buffer area. It doesn't. I mean,
Yeah,
if it's not gonna apply, it should say so in this section.
I think that was from how Bluffton did their code with the wetlands, so I don't know that we need to do that.
It seems that stormwater, at least in a few years ago, was such a big issue in terms of development, adding so much more cost, time. I don't know, I just wanna make sure that we're not adding a lot of extra, sorry, regulations on.
An individual,
small
a development of individual single
Right.
family home lots, no, you wouldn't wanna include that, but when you say the 5,000 square foot standard. You know, I mean, a normal two-story house, even on a big house, 5,000 square feet, that's 2,500 square feet per floor, and then you got a driveway of a.
Totally, it's, you know, actual footprint.
No, that's what I mean, so that's 2,500 of actual footprint, and then you got a driveway probably and parking area of a similar size, that's gonna be under 5,000. Now, a swimming pool can add quite a bit, and that would be considered under the county as impervious, same way they consider retention ponds, you know, because it's essentially, it's a retention pond. So, you know, somebody who's building a great big house with a big swimming pool, he could get about 5,000 square feet.
Yeah.
Yeah, and all that, yeah, you could, yeah, you could, yeah, you usually
Maybe
could.
not in the city, but out in the county.
But maybe, I mean, maybe that's the compound problem that the lady was talking about here earlier with those large house, large accessory building, basically fill up the whole lot.
Yeah, but it's at 5,000 square feet based on acreage.
No, it's.
No, it's disturbed areas, so
Yeah.
our spot, well,
Could be for
let's take perfect example, there's spot lots. And, you know, even with that size house, and those are only 850 square feet ADUs. The house, they're under 5,000. And each individual lot is under that, and because it was done as a minor subdivision, 5 lots. Don't trigger all of the stormwater for the whole subdivision. Does this make sense? And so each lot is done on its merits, not.
So that's why
as a
she's
whole.
grouping them together, because it was a single developer that did a
Single
small subdivision.
developer,
Okay,
but he created, well, it was actually a different developer, they created 4 additional lots.
I think you get away with that.
Well, it's allowed in our code.
But impervious
Great
surface,
example of a crappy code.
impervious surface should be related to acreage. So if you've got 3 acres of ground, 5,000 square feet on 3 acres is nothing. So somehow it ought to be related to acreage, and vice versa. If you've got a really small one,
Like 80%. We have,
develop 80%.
well, we have something of that in our code in each district, but it's like 60%, 50%. But you know, each one of those lots were under those requirements and they're all.
so how do we,
But I'm saying for our code, the 5,000 square feet. Not working well as it should, if that's just the hard, fast fact.
so how do we define applicability to exempt certain properties? What language can we use? Because this language says it applies to everything. And
Well,
we
I think
don't want
that's,
that.
to me, and someone else, you know, I think it's a very technical document that's already been defined, and figured out by a number of engineers over a number of years. I don't know that we have the expertise to get into all that, right? I mean, and they already got an exemption in there.
So it's, the exemptions are in the Soloco.
Do you think it's worth a presentation by the engineer to tell
Sure.
us what's in there? I mean, if we're recommending adopting something that is new or it's not new, or I don't know. I
It's
mean,
not adopted now officially, but it's been in use for several years.
So,
I mean, especially in light of the complaint that was, I mean, if we've been using it and that was the result. I don't know,
Yeah.
maybe.
Well, no, yeah, that's what I was trying to explain. So those were, that was a minor subdivision that didn't have to go through the solo requirement.
Yeah.
Because each individual lot is under 5,000 square foot.
Somebody here in the public wants to say something.
Yeah.
I think this would be a good point to take a look at that property next to the Rubens that we're talking about, the compound on Lafayette. This has all the making I define here. And the bigger problem that I saw from the problems created from the downwash, the amount of backfill they brought in and didn't contain it. That's a part of it too. They were probably right on that cut line of having pretty close to 5,000 square feet when you combine those three properties. So it's right on the edge, but that should be your test case. Looking how to tighten up that section of this code. Because what was done there was just short-sighted, poorly engineered.
Okay.
I'm just thinking if that was T3 and it says for the lot itself, not talking about the subdivision, but so you can have 45% maximum lot coverage. So supposedly more than half of the lot is pervious or whatever. But I'm just suggesting maybe it would be worth. I certainly don't know what's in the huge document. There's been.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's would make the most sense. It's just
a
having,
lot more.
finding a time.
Is that percentage coverage, is that impervious coverage or what
It
is?
says maximum lot coverage.
No, it's
That's just footprint.
Total, it says total impervious coverage, maybe an additional 10%.
Oh, okay.
So, it's maximum coverage, like, so buildings would be 45%, then your driveway. I don't know, whatever,
Okay.
there's swimming pool will be
Yeah.
an additional 10%.
Okay.
So, but.
That's what
You got a 5,000 square foot lot?
I think we still need to put that language in that I just highlighted here, because so local does apply to any disturbed area greater than 5,000 square feet on any lot, single lot of record, right? I think we do need to kind of put that language in here, at least that, because now it says this section applies to any disturbance within a wetland or wetland buffer area, but that's not correct.
I think, well, how about we just, you know, I think it makes some sense to have our education.
But the way we look at it, any disturbed area, no matter if it's within or without a wetland.
Well, I think it's actually here.
If we're just gonna refer to that book, we don't need to have any of that stuff in here.
Yeah, exactly.
But Libby's point that we don't really know, none of us know, as we sit here what that book says.
Well,
And
the
we're hearing a few
applicability section
things.
is very short. And the exemption section is very short, looking at it online. You
In
know,
the solo code.
right, the Bluffton one, yeah. And, but it talks about development that involves 5,000 square feet or more of land disturbing activities. Then it says any redevelopment infill that would result in an additional 2,000 square feet or more of impervious surface. Then it goes on a little bit further. I mean,
I think it's all good to look at new impervious, but then what do you do about it? I mean, how do, you know, do they need a rain garden? Okay, that's not too, but now I need to put it, I don't know.
Well, would you like me to schedule, you know, I don't know, it sounds like you want to do the ADU discussion. But planning commission, do you want to add like that could take a lot of time, do you
There's no
want to
way you can do both, I mean, that's.
do you want to schedule this for the next work session?
Rental thing is huge, I mean, there's gonna be you average a lot of public comment, it's a big, that by itself is a big issue.
Well,
I mean,
we could go back and forth between it, if it's gonna take a little while to get the engineer to present to us, we could take up the other stuff, you know, and come back to it.
I guess I was just suggesting if you want to do planning commission as a short-term rental slash ADU discussion, July 21st, is that what it is?
Go up that big one, is that it?
We can do that, and then I can try to get
Go
our
up one
engineer
foot
to
further.
attend our next work session, which would be the first week of August.
Okay,
So what that, all that language there is in the, is in the Bluffton ordinance. So, I mean, I don't know why we repeat it all. If we're adopting the ordinance, I don't know that we have to do anything more than adopt that particular ordinance.
yeah.
I mean, it's all in there.
Well, I think you had some concerns about what would be exempted, that's why it's out.
Well, it has, it starts out, it says any maintenance, alteration, et cetera, and then number 2 is projects that are exclusive, then it does that, and number 3 is agriculture, and so it's all in there.
We made some changes though.
Did you make some changes
Yeah,
of
we
your own?
did last time already, see how we.
Well, I do think it would be helpful to have the engineer here to talk to us, and I suggest that we defer this section until after we can get him in talking to us.
Do you think having a revised copy of all this that we talked about today about where we're headed would be helpful, and then that's in front of us, and then the person's talking and we're putting it all together?
Who is it that we're gonna get?
McCormick.
The McCormick guy,
Jason
with that from,
What's his last name?
Hedrick.
Yeah, see, you have a comment.
Yes, actually, 2 things in one day. Have a concern about referring to a town's ordinance, because, you know, just with our ordinances, how we've changed them over time, once we change them, they drop off of online access. So that concerns me. I mean, what if Bluffton changed something and their manual that we're talking about just drops off from access?
One reason why we have the printed version.
We got that drops off from access.
Like, the 2010 code for Beaufort, you can't access that anymore.
We do have copies of it, so when.
So
That's
people
why-
have to come to you
If you
for
really
a
needed to
paper copy
know
of it.
some developments or have agreements, you have that copy.
And one other option would be to put it online in our city website.
well, you could actually, I mean, the way I see it, the way that Bluffton, we refer to it as Bluffton Stormwater Manual, but it's actually the Southern Low Country Stormwater Design Manual, effective date September 15, 2021, amended March 11, 2025, which is,
That makes more sense.
which is, instead of referring to it as Bluffton, that's what it actually is called. And that's what I was saying last time, is why don't we call it by what it's called, rather than
I agree.
I agree very much.
We did, that's what we thought, you know, that would happen, so we need to change it.
And it's written by McCormick and Taylor, so presumably they'll let us know when they're. Since they're also our engineers, is that right?
But we don't want Bluffton amendments to apply to us.
Right.
That's why we picked a specific version,
But we'll call it that also.
right?
Yeah.
So do you have the title up on your screen right now?
Second thing I wanted to talk about, a concern on 8.3.1 C and E. For some reason, you added in here, it used to be minimize increases in stormwater runoff, blah, blah, blah. And minimize the total surface water runoff, blah, 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 and you changed it to minimize the effects of increases. And minimize the total impact of surface water. I was just wondering why you downgraded that from actually minimizing the amount of stormwater runoff.
You can repeat the question.
I don't know.
Yeah.
Reading it.
Yeah, page is that.
What page is it?
The clean property. 23.1 C and E. The current code says minimize increases in stormwater runoff, that minimize the total surface water runoff.
It was changed in this clean copy to minimize the effects of increases and minimize the total impact on service. Quite different. That's assuming that you're gonna have a lot more increase rather than trying to just minimize the increase. Begin with.
Well, whenever you have development, there's gonna be an increase in stormwater runoff. So what you're really trying to do is, and I think that came up because I brought that up because you're trying to minimize the effects. So what is usually regulated is the rate of flow of stormwater runoff. Because, I mean, if this room is just a big piece of dirt here and you set a table in the middle of it, you know, it's gonna affect the total runoff because there's gonna be more total runoff because there's more impervious surface. So what engineers try to deal with is deal with the effects, and one way is to slow the rate of runoff off that property. And that's what you do through detention and so forth. So that's why we put the word effects in there. I think it's working toward the same end, but it's whenever you do development.
Assuming a lot more runoff rather than trying to minimize the, I guess.
You're gonna have runoff, but you try to minimize the effects because you can't deal with the total volume, because the total volume will obviously increase when you eliminate pervious surfaces.
Yeah, those were additions that were made after discussion. So I like that language.
Good questions.
Question about the next meeting is gonna, let's say, discuss topic of short-term rentals. How do you want to handle that? And the reason I ask is because it looks like there's no changes being proposed in the current version. No changes proposed to short-term rental regulations. Are we rethinking that, or is this to get public comment?
It seems as though, so I think the thinking was,
strategy.
I think the thinking was that there's a lot of people out there that have problems with short-term rentals and the ADUs. And we haven't come up with anything yet on how we want to change that. You know, we might be able to in a meeting or so, but the idea was to accelerate that timetable by hearing what's on people's minds about that. What are the problems with it? Because it might affect how we go about writing the revisions to that. I think that's the idea.
And I think I had sent out my sort of thoughts on that issue, maybe probably too many times.
No,
so I personally had sort of some thoughts about that, but I just didn't know. It seems like a
Well, I
strategy.
think you can send those out, but by the same token, I think Kurt's gonna find out, I think from, city council, whether or not we can separate those things out independently and get them to review those independently or not. And I think that if we go ahead and have those sections printed out for the board so that we can take a look at them before we get the public comments, then I think we can react to that a little bit.
I mean, it takes a little bit of pressure off the city council, it seems like, since they're gonna have to
And
come here anyway.
they're getting a lot of
Yeah.
pressure. But I think, like, today we heard some concerns, and a lot of them, in my opinion, have more to do with the short-term rentals
Right.
than they have to do with the outbuildings.
Yeah.
But, there's some other ones that weren't mentioned, but I've heard from the city council meetings, like, there's wild partiers and drug use, weapons, a lot of safety considerations that were raised by other members of the public. And so it would be great to kind of compile a hit list of concerns to sort of hit list of short-term rental of concerns.
Somebody said that the neighborhoods were delineated somewhere on the map.
Yes. So if you do a Google search on short-term rentals, city of Beaufort, South Carolina, you will be taken to a page on the city of Beaufort website. That's kind of like your guide to short-term rentals. One of the things on that page is a map that shows, you were asking where neighborhoods were?
Neighborhoods and percent
There's both a static map that shows what the neighborhoods are, and apparently there is a live map that shows a percentage. I didn't click on the live map link, but when I'm having a drink tonight after this meeting, I will,
So there's that 6% rule that applies to non-owner occupied.
right,
Short-term rentals. Except in the point, you can't have short-term rentals at all.
No.
So I mean, from a standpoint of regulation. Obviously, they were treated much differently probably because they all made a lot of noise. I mean, every neighborhood could be treated that same way if we wanted to. I'm not saying we should, but it's just interesting that we set out that neighborhood completely different than my neighborhood or your neighborhood.
That's right.
I mean,
That's right.
why is that?
And there's,
They had a better lobby going for them. You were probably here at the time, I don't know.
Yeah, oh yeah, we had two task force, the initial one and then.
So what was the whole idea that they were so special that they?
That's what you said.
They come to the meeting, they make a lot of noise, they talk to the council.
Right, they asked that we absolutely do not want short-term rentals.
Yeah, and I bet a lot of neighborhoods, it's now that they've experienced that.
That's why it's time to relook at the whole issue, I think, and we've learned a lot, experienced it, and housing is a priority now, and we just need to.
And it really has.
I think the impact of the pandemic was important in how this got so out of hand, because remember, you couldn't go to hotels, you couldn't do a lot of things. People weren't traveling this far, and it really changed.
But it has affected the ability for home ownership, because all of a sudden,
It has, yeah.
you know, you got renters everywhere, short term, worse, much worse.
And we can say, yes, there's a limit, TMI probably, but that 6% again is based on the number of lots in the neighborhood.
Right,
Not developed lots, not lots used for residential purposes, so some
Right.
neighborhoods have a lot of, so in other words, 6%. That the denominator, if it's.
Well,
Makes a big difference, so Northwest Quadrant, for example, maybe in comparison, it had a lot of vacant lots. A lot of non-residential property, churches, this and that, so their 6% number is a lot more than you might think.
Exactly.
So it's, it's really, there's a lot of nuances to it. But bottom line is, do we feel that in single family neighborhoods, the T3S and the T3N, when you can't do anything except basically have a single family dwelling, that you should, again, live in whatever, Minnesota, and own a property in the Northwest Quadrant and rent it out, whatever. That's just, it's just, it's just, I think.
And also
Go ahead, I'm sorry.
Oh, I was just gonna bring it back in, I was gonna say, so I'll inquire if they're okay with that. I'll send the results to everybody, and I guess I can talk to Mike. Like, and if they say that doesn't seem like a very good idea, maybe then we go back to chapter 8.
Yeah.
Chapter 8.
And if they,
Does that sound
real,
You have information.
I'll try to get Jason here first, if that's not the
no, I
case.
mean, I just have.
First, the issue about
Or at least I'm.
transferability of the license for short-term rental and new people getting
That's-
shut out.
Yeah, there's a lot of concerns about that, but it's operated between two different, most of it's done by finance, not by enforcement. The code is in the development code, but we really don't touch it.
It's done
We
by
do a one
business license.
inspection.
There's a business license, same as just safety.
Yeah, that's right there. We do a safety inspection the first time you apply, it's the last time we see it. It doesn't get seen ever again, so. Could be safe this year and then 10 years from now.
this is one property.
yeah,
Did
but
we
you do
discuss
have two
work session, next work session date, or should we just discuss it at the meeting?
residents. If you wanna discuss that in the meeting, but I think the earlier we do it, the better for me. The earlier we do it, the better.
Yeah,
We're talking about an August work session?
and that's some commercial area.
Yeah,
You live on the rock,
Yeah.
I didn't do that. So people were like,
Okay.
Does everybody?
21, plan.
You said on the Monday, first Monday.
Yeah, so it would be August fifth.
August,
Fourth.
August fourth. August fourth work for everybody, including.
August fourth, you said?
Oh, my God. I'll be out of town, but. don't worry
Well, we've
about
got a
it.
waterfront commission meeting that day at 5. On August 4th.
You don't have to stay here from.
Just go from one meeting to the next. Just transport in there, okay? Transport yourself, teleport yourself.
Been there, done that already.
Well, how about the 11th?
August. What's going on in the fourth? That's a work session?
Waterfront
That's the
advisory.
waterfront.
Oh, that's what you're going to say. What's,
The 11th works for me. August
Okay.
11th works for me.
Yeah, it's good for me.
Hey, Bill.
That's fine.
That's a planning meeting.
Okay, August 11th.
what are we gonna talk on that meeting?
So,
What are we talking about on that meeting?
Did you tap Bill for?
well, I guess chapter 8, but
You said that was at
We'll
5
see
o'clock
how this
August fourth, I
goes.
just wanna jot it down,
Yes.
because I'm streaming.
then maybe we'll get into chapters 2, 3, and 4, or we'll do the accessory building units.
What time will be the August 11th meeting? 1 o'clock?
I guess 1 o'clock.
So I'm out, I can't get on my,
You can get on.
calling in. Gotta be that.
You can.
There's the,
What is the current policy on attending meetings by Zoom?
Can do.
And you can also vote by Zoom, so somebody could
You
attend,
can't vote by Zoom, I don't think.
Yeah.
and they've done it, city council's done it in the past.
Oh, well.
And we used to do it in DRB sometimes.
Yes, you can.
I was just wondering if there was a change in the policy.
no, it's the same, it's been the same since COVID.
Okay,
I think the thought is this should be only used in stream circuit.
well, it's really hard, especially with the setup upstairs, which you can't even usually see the people.
We don't even know if somebody's
You don't
there.
have to see them. They usually have their camera off.
Yeah, I wanna see them.
So the next meeting, we're presuming we're going to talk about rentals. That's next meeting.
With no other agenda items?
Now,
Okay.
and is there any code or sections that covers?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay, I saw that, yeah.
Would be a pretty bad.
Well, here, see, I know what's not to talk about.
Well, both of those guys.